All right, folks, we'll call the meeting to order. This is May 16, 2017. This is a meeting of the Frankfort Plant Board. First thing I want to do is ask Kathy Poe if she would call the roll of the directors.
Member Ludwig?
Here.
Member Green?
Here.
Member Keeban?
Here.
Member Baldwin?
Here.
Member Rosen? Here.
Again, this is our May meeting. We have a regular meeting every month as a minimum. However, technically it's a special meeting because it so happens that this evening we're in a new location, and I mean a really new location. But first, I want to extend my thanks and that of the staff and board to the United Bank of Frankfort, formerly the Farmers Bank of Frankfort. For 2 years, United Bank has made its community room available to the Frankfort Plant Board for its meetings, regular meetings, special meetings. They've done this gratuitously, and we've really appreciated it. It's enabled us to not have to run around and try to find a location for every meeting. So again, I very much appreciate what United Bank has done for this board, staff, and this community. Again, we're in a new location now at the corner of Sauer and Flynn, the new administration building of the Frankfort Plant Board. Technically, it's a special meeting tonight because this is not yet our technically officially set regular location for our meetings. But this building is the result of years of hope and planning and work by many, many people to bring this building into existence. I believe it will serve this community and the Frankfort Plant Board for 100 years. And with that, I'll get into the agenda this evening. The first item is our standard item. It's an action item, of course, and it's to consider approving the minutes for the April 18, 2017 special board meeting. I think Kathy and William have provided the minutes to the board members. And I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions or motions with regard to those minutes as submitted.
I make a motion we approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion? Is there anything?
They look good.
Okay. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Minutes stand approved as submitted. Okay. Next item is also an action item. It's a regular monthly item. Hear from David Denton, our finance director, and he'll brush over the electric, water, and cable financial and statistical data for April 2017.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening. We've, as you know, we're fiscal year in June 30, so we've just finished up 10 months of our fiscal year. Just a little recap for those that might be watching. We are a nonprofit organization, so we do not have a profit motive. When we look at budgeting and setting rates, we're looking at four main factors. Looking at enough revenue to be able to cover our operating expenses, enough revenue also to be able to invest in infrastructure, which is this company is heavily leveraged in that way. We're also looking at being able to pay down the debt service on our existing lines of bonds and also FSN and then KyMEA notes, and also being able to have enough reserves in the bank to be able to make sure that we are strong financially for our bond rating, also in case there is an incident that we have enough funds to draw on. So considering that, I'd like to start on page 47. This is a statement of net position. This is similar to a balance sheet for a for-profit organization. So starting on the first column on page 47, through the 10 months as of April 30th, 2017, Frankfort Plant Board on line 65 had total assets of just over $165.7 million. As I talked about with heavily infrastructure and investment, the company, of our total assets, 70% of those are invested in property, plant, and equipment, net of our accumulated depreciation, just over $116 million. It's worth pointing out that when you look at our fixed assets, the book value, and you look at the depreciation, accumulated depreciation, you'll see that about 53% of our assets are totally depreciated. We depreciate most of our electric assets at 30 years, 50 years for water, 15 years for cable. So when you look at 53% of our total assets being depreciated, it just kind of gives you an idea of the investment needed to continue to keep our system in good working order. Looking at other assets we have, the next largest would be our cash and cash equivalents on line 5 of just over $17.3 million for the period. We have a cash and investments report that's required that we'll go through here next. And looking at that, next highest after that would be also our receivables at just over $12.5 million. So just those are a highlight of some of the big ones. You can see for the year we've had our biggest increase in the property, plant, and equipment, mainly due to the construction of this administration building we're in. Moving on to liabilities, line 120, total liabilities as of April 30th were just over $84 million. When you look at the breakdown of that, about 53% of our total liabilities were due to our outstanding debt for Kentucky Infrastructure Authority. We have electric and water revenue bonds and also our telecom debt. So 53% composed of those. With the other 26% is our net KRS pension liability. That's an actuarially determined liability we have based of our participation in Kentucky retirement system. You put those two together, we're right at 79% of our total assets, with the rest of them being relatively current in nature. You take our assets less our liability, gives you our net position on line 155 of just over $81.7 million for the year, bringing total assets and liabilities back to $165.7 million. So nothing much different from what we've seen in months past. I'd like to move on, if there's no questions, to page 48. This is our cash and investments report that we provide. This is required by our investment policy. I just want to point out a few things. On line 105, total cash for the period was just over $17.3 million. Of that, 12% of our total cash, just over 12.1, was restricted for various restrictions such as debt retirement or those that are held aside to be used for capital projects. Unrestricted cash at 88% of total unrestricted is just under $15.2 million. Below that, in the next box, we looked at our investments. These are all invested in certificates of deposit. Looking at the total amount of investments of $9.4 million, 99% of those, $9.3 million, are restricted, primarily due for our bond covenants. We must hold certain cash in hand for debt retirement. And then 1% of those CDs is unrestricted. I'd like to move on and talk briefly about where we look as of April 30th as far as our bonds, leases, and KIA notes payable. You can see there we started the fiscal year out at just over $47.6 million. You can see from the decreases we've paid down over $3.5 million for the year. As of April 30th, 2017, we had just over $44.1 million. You know, we talk about the reduction here of $3.5 million. When you look at the actual interest paid, which is over on our statement of revenue asset or revenue expenses and change in net assets, that's adding another $1.14 million to that. So when you look at principal and interest that we've paid for the first 10 months of this year, we're over $4.6 million. So when I talk about those four pieces of rates that we need in order to cover all the liabilities and also all the responsibilities we have, you know, we've paid over $4.6 million in cash has gone to service debt for this period. I look forward to, as we have the first week of June, talking about our budget. Something I'm proud of, and I hope that we can stay to. We have some debt that we need to issue in the first year for the reservoir. We also have some debt outstanding that we can draw down for infrastructure improvements to our cable telecom division. But as the way it stands today and the way we'll propose it to the board is that we would have no debt issuance years 2 through 5 and in the foreseeable future. So I look forward to presenting that to you in the first week of June. We'll have that budget report to you next week also. But that's something that I look forward to covering with you in the weeks ahead.
David, can I ask you a real quick question?
Yes, sir.
On the graph there at the bottom on page 49, it's my understanding that when it comes time for the reservoir debt, that we have the one debt rolling off on 12/1/19.
Yes, sir.
And that for a short period of time will spike a little bit, but then, in fact, the new reservoir debt will actually be less in terms of annual debt service than what we're currently retiring on that current. So the trend down on debt service will continue. Is that right?
Yes, sir. You're
Okay.
right. That Series 2009 bond does pay off in December 1st of 2019. It's around $1.2 million in debt service annually, and we're looking at around $250,000 on the reservoir payment. So yes, net.
We'll have net
service
debt a decrease,
will
even with the
decrease.
reservoir debt on there.
And looking at this in the next 5 years, that's the Series 2009 will be retired, and also you see the green section here, which is our FSN consolidated lease. Today, the balance of that is take that back, $10 million even. We will pay that off in March of 2022. That's another, if you consider interest on top of that, almost $2.3 million. So when you look at the whole thing, we're almost $3.5 million in the next 5 years.
That will
we
roll
not
off.
that will go off. So that will, just like your personal finances, whenever you have less debt, you have more options.
Like
So-
paying your car off.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Paying cash is never bad. So, if there are no other questions, I'd like to move on to page 50 and just look at the financial performance for the company the first 10 months of the year. Looking at line 20, total operating revenue, we're down 1.1 million from our what we expected, budgeted. Electric and cable telecom are down a little. We're up in water due primarily to our wholesale water customers. Overall, the company-wide, we have kept costs under control. We are below budgeted amounts. You can see on line 335 that we're up 8.5 million for the year net contribution. And like I say, that net contribution amount is going to what we've talked about. The operating expenses are included in here. That $8.5 million then goes to service debt and invest in infrastructure, and then hopefully to pad our reserves going forward. So that's where we are through the first 10 months of the year. As always, I think we've provided to you a summary of all our cash activity for all our bank accounts, and also the activity at the check register for our two main operating accounts starting on page 54. I'd be glad to answer any more questions, but that's a brief summary of where we are.
Any questions or comments for David? If not, I'll move that we approve the submitted electric, water, and cable financial and statistical data for April 2017.
I move we accept the report, or,
I made the motion.
Second.
oh, I'm sorry.
Second. Discussion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, one point you made, David, was that income from cable is down a little bit.
When you look budget to actual, and I think part of the reason in budgeting, we started out the year, we're looking to start budgeting around March, April. When you look at where we would be at customers starting July 1, I think we were a little optimistic. And, starting out the year, we were already behind. So when you look at budget to actual, that's the main reason. But overall, the company as a whole, if you turn over to page 53, 53 is a summary of our statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position for the cable telecom division. I'm looking at line 280. We had budgeted net increase, and net position would be 3.2 million. We're at just under 3.1 million. So overall, cost containment has overcome that lack of, I should say, the difference we see in budget to actual.
But revenue for fiscal 17, 18 will be at a lower base than what we started the current year, right?
The number of customers, for sure. Broadband, we are still seeing increases there, but as we talked about during our budget work session, those same trends are holding. You can see when you talk about actual to actual between last year at this time, this year, so I'm looking at the third column versus the next to last column, we're at just under 23.2, and we were actually just over 23.2. So we are just about the same total revenue. With decreasing customers, I know our customers have not enjoyed the increases in rates, but that's primarily what's kept us even.
Any more questions or comments for David? Okay, we have a motion to approve, and we've had a second. All in favor of approval of the report as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Hearing no no's, the statistical reports stand as accepted. Thank you, David. Next item is also an action item. That is acceptance of the Comer Customer Service Survey Reports. This, I think, is Monique and Ms. Comer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. In the fall of 2016, the board approved for staff to contract with Comer Research LLC to perform a transaction survey in the customer service department. And customers were contacted regarding their transactions with CSRs between October 2016 and March 2017. Tonight, Leanna Comer with Comer Research Consultants LLC is with us to give a report of those findings.
Good evening, and thanks for having me tonight.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm here to share with you the results of the survey. As Monique pointed out, this survey was a telephone survey that we conducted beginning last fall in October and concluded with calls made in March. Each month, at the beginning of the month, we received a list of all customers who had interacted with the customer service department at the plant board the previous month, whether those be via phone call or in person. And each month we would randomly select 83 of those customers to interview. And at the conclusion of the study, we had 532 customers that we spoke to over that 6-month period. This yields a margin of error, for those of you who are into the statistical side of it, of 4.2 percentage points at the 95% confidence level. In short, this is a statistically significant survey. We interviewed enough customers so that we can be confident in the results that we're seeing. We made sure that we interviewed an appropriate number of customers based on the type of transaction they had had. That second chart that I have table, for example, billing questions were the most common, so they were 52% of all the customers we interviewed had contacted the utility with a billing question. Problems reported were 19%, start and stop service 17%, change service was 6%. And payment arrangement, we did actually increase the number of people we talked to ever so slightly on that. And the reason I did that is I wanted to talk to at least 30 customers who had that experience to allow me to do some statistical analysis that wouldn't have been possible with a smaller sample size. So if we had done it strictly proportionately, I think we would have talked to 17, and instead we talked to 30 just to make sure that we had enough so that I could run some statistical tests. As you're, I'm sure, aware, most of the interactions did take place over the telephone. 93% of the transactions were by phone, and that's how they represented in our survey. The purpose of this survey, as Monique mentioned, was really to assess the job performance of the customer service department and to better understand the experience that your customers have when they contact the utility for any matter. We asked them to rate their overall satisfaction with the experience that they had on a 7-point scale, where 1 was completely dissatisfied and 7 was completely satisfied. This chart represents the percentage of customers who rated their experience overall either a 6 or a 7. And you may say, well, why 6 and 7? What we find is that some people won't give a perfect score, in this case a 7, under any circumstances, but most of the people who give a 6 typically report being happy with the experience. They usually have really nothing negative to say. However, when we look at people who give scores of 5, there usually is a what I call a but in there. Well, it was pretty good, but, and they'll list something that's negative. So someone who gave a 5 isn't someone who I would consider necessarily dissatisfied. I would consider them less than satisfied. They made up another 9%, the folks who gave a score of 5, but the ones who I would deem satisfied with their experience was 75%, or 3 out of 4 customers who interacted with the utility. This next chart goes into a little more detail on those satisfaction scores, and it illustrates the percentage of customers who were satisfied based on the type of transaction. As I pointed out earlier, overall 3 out of 4 were satisfied, but you can see there was variance based on the type of interaction, the reason for their transaction. Going from a low of 67% among those who were calling to make a payment arrangement. We spoke, as I pointed out, to 30 of those people, and then 70% among those who were calling to report some type of problem. Change service was slightly higher, billing questions at 75%, and then start and stop service was the highest rated type of transaction at 85%. This is not uncommon. As you can imagine, anyone who's calling to make some type of payment arrangement, that's not the most comfortable of conversations to have with the CSR or the person calling. So that can be a difficult conversation. In other surveys that I've conducted for other utilities, this is a very typical outcome, that the payment arrangements is the lowest rated and that reporting problems is also. Again, they're calling because something's wrong. Sometimes that's a minor thing, and they, as you see, 70% were still happy, but it's, again, not surprising to see that as a lower rated transaction. So we did follow that question up with why did you give that rating you gave. The ones who I would consider our dissatisfied customers, or those who gave scores of 1 through 4, often the reason for their dissatisfaction wasn't necessarily the transaction itself, but more the outcome. They didn't like the answer they got, or their situation wasn't resolved as quickly as they expected it to be. So not always a reflection on the person that they were speaking with, but the outcome of that. Now, there were some comments about unpleasant employees. Those were limited. A lack of follow-up or follow-through. So these were the reasons that people cited for giving their lower scores. Those who gave scores of 5, as I mentioned before, not people I would consider necessarily dissatisfied, but there was something that prevented them to give a higher score. They often complained about the wait time. That was the most common complaint among those folks who gave 5s. And those who gave 6s and 7s, they talked about very pleasant CSRs, the outcome of the contact, how quickly things were resolved. So very positive comments with regard to those. And as I pointed out, the people who gave 5s, that represented 9% of everyone we spoke to. So what I would consider low scores, the 1 through 4, that was about 16% of all customers. We did specifically ask a question about wait time with regard to how long it took them to speak to a CSR. The folks who came to the office were seen, or they felt like that was more palatable to them, that they had a higher level of satisfaction with the wait time. You can see there were only 40 people, so it's a small sample size, but that's a pretty significant difference. Those who were in the office were seen quicker, or had that perception that they didn't have to wait as long as those people who called into the office. And then the overall average was 54% satisfaction. In addition to asking about the overall experience, we really wanted to measure the job performance of the CSRs to make sure that they were living up to expectations and providing a positive experience for your customers. So we asked the customers to rate the CSRs on 4 different attributes. We asked them to rate the level of knowledge that CSR demonstrated, how well they listened to you as a customer, the professionalism that was shown, and the friendliness. And I'm pleased to report that all of those were very positive scores. Everything was above 80%, which I would consider very positive. Friendliness was the highest rated at 87. Level of knowledge was lowest at 81, but again, that would be a high score based on similar studies that I've conducted. We also asked them to rate their satisfaction with the quality of work performed. About a quarter of the folks that we interviewed said there really wasn't any work to be done. You know, I just had a really simple question. So we had 24% who didn't answer this question. This is a reflection of those who did answer the question. And also I've broken this out by the nature of the transaction. You can see that the overall average was 78% were satisfied with the quality of the work performed. With payment arrangements, again, at the low end of the scale, which would not be surprising, and start-stop service at the top. We did ask customers who gave a score of 5 or below to tell us a little bit more about why they gave that rating. So if they were satisfied, the 6s and 7s, we didn't ask to follow it. But if they gave a 5 or below, we asked that, why they were dissatisfied. And really many cited just sort of a reiteration of what they'd already told us about their experience. It maybe didn't have necessarily to do with the work performed, but just whatever their little pain point was with the experience. The lack of follow-through, comments like I'm still waiting for it to be resolved, or I had to call more than once, and or the length of time it took for the resolutions were the most commonly cited things as to why people were less than satisfied with the quality of work. And oftentimes it took them a long time to come out and fix the problem, which is a reflection of why they gave the score. But in the context of this being a customer service department survey, would be outside the realm of what the customer service department is responsible for. We also asked satisfaction with resolution time. So earlier when I was talking about time, it was the amount of wait time. This is how satisfied were you with the amount of time it took to resolve your issue or problem. We had 3 out of 4 customers who were satisfied with the resolution time, and you can see that there was a difference once again based on the type of transaction. We also wanted to know if they spoke to other people within the plant board. We know that there are occasions where a CSR might transfer a call to someone else outside of the department. We had 16% of customers who said, yes, I did speak to someone other than a CSR. Interestingly, though, we also know from data that is collected at the time of the call that not 16% of calls don't actually get transferred out of the customer service department. So we know there's a discrepancy there. I think the customer, because they were transferred, didn't know if they were still within the CSR department or if they were being transferred to another department within the utility. But we did ask them if they were transferred to someone else, the satisfaction they had with the other employee they spoke with, and that too was a high score at 78%. We also asked some questions that were more general in nature, not specific to the transaction itself, but really to gauge some views and thoughts about Frankfort Plant Board as a whole. For this particular series of questions, we asked customers to indicate the extent to which they agreed or disagreed with 3 different statements. These statements reflect what we know, or I know as a researcher, really drive your satisfaction, which is reliability, cost, and customer service. So we asked customers, how strongly do you agree or disagree with the statement, I consider Frankfort Plant Board to be a good value. I am pleased with the reliability of service provided by Frankfort Plant Board, and Frankfort Plant Board is a customer-friendly company. And this reflects the results of that. You can see that customer-friendly company was highest rated, 87% agreed with that statement, and that was followed with reliability, which was 85%, and lowest rated would be good value. Frankly, this is not at all a surprise to me. The only thing that really I see any changes, sometimes reliability outweighs customer service, but cost is always the statement which people agree with. Nobody likes to pay for utility service regardless of whether it's a good value or not. So this does not surprise me at all. But still, I mean, you have nearly 2/3 of customers who were satisfied with that they are receiving a good value. We also asked a general question with, overall, we said, your experience with the customer service department aside, how do you feel about the plant board overall? How would you rate your satisfaction with them as a utility company? We use that same 7-point scale, and you can see that just over 6 out of 10 gave high ratings overall to the Frankfort Plant Board. To provide a little bit of context to that, if you're familiar with, there's an organization called the American Customer Satisfaction Index, and they measure customer satisfaction for hundreds of companies throughout the United States, and they break it down into all different segments, industry segments, and on their annual report, municipal utilities across the country score a 68, and when we look at national cable television companies, it's a 65. So this would be comparable to that. I do caution you that it's not apples to apples. Their methodology is very different from mine, but I did want to have some context to that. So this would fall what I would consider a little bit below average, but not significantly below average. And when we did have a follow-up to that. Again, if they gave a 6 or 7, we didn't ask them why, but if they gave a 5 or below, we asked them to comment on why they gave that score. And cost was the comment that was made most often were related to price and costs, again, not uncommon. And there were some mentions of reliability issues. Those were mostly around internet related, a little bit of cable, but the cost issue was the one that was cited most often.
Ma'am, on that point, any breakdown there, cost concerns between departments, water, electric, and cable telecom?
We didn't go into that. I mean, we didn't specifically ask. Now, some people did comment about this particular service is too high. Most of the comments, though, were just generally.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'd also like to add, pertaining to that question, Ralph, is that on Table 3, which was services related to transaction, 43% of the calls were cable telecom. And then it goes on, and there's some combined calls, another 19 and 10%. So 29% plus 43 are related to cable and telecom. So it looks like that is a difficult area for us, just water and electric.
Well, I would point out that outages and issues with electric and water are less commonplace across these industries. I mean, if you think about, like, I don't live here. I live in Winchester. I couldn't tell you the last time I lost electric service. I've never lost water service. My cable goes out pretty regularly. My internet, I have issues with that. So I don't think that that's really unusual. I don't see that as being largely different from what other places would experience. I would expect those type of calls to happen more often.
Well, in reading through this, I thought about that in the wait times and not confusion, but not understanding why things aren't working. Seems to go to that department more than any other area. And so in trying to solve those problems, we would improve our performance in customer service.
Right. Well, and it's my understanding that you have recently made a lot of investments in improving those very things. People have long memories, and if they've had negative experiences in the past, they hang on to that memory for a while. So, again, it's my understanding that you have made inroads to working on those issues. I don't think that's going to be reflected for a little while because people still remember and they weren't happy with those experiences.
Mr. Chairman, can I comment real quick or ask a question? Leanna, you're saying October to March is the time, but
September transactions through February transactions.
So
Exactly.
I'll remind the board from a context standpoint, and talking with Leanna and with Monique about this over the last couple of days, we moved everything we owned in the cable telecom department in August, September, and October. Mm-hmm. And we had a significant amount of outages for every single customer multiple times, depending on what it was we were moving, voice, video, data, that kind of thing. In addition to that, we underperformed on internet access going back a few years until we moved into the new building and made almost a $2 million investment in the internet side. So I think what Leanna's saying in a way is, we've got some making up to do. We've got some long memories on some service issues that that we contributed to. At the same time, in the same window, we had a cable rate increase in January. So we also are the Cable Telecom Department over this 6 month period did all the cutoffs for I think 3 of those 6 months because of cold weather. And so that again, you could see typically in a month where we might have 100 or so voice, video, or data cutoffs for non-payment. You can see 500 to 700 of them in 1 month in those 3 months in the wintertime where it's too cold to cut off electric and water. I'm not saying that we all don't have work to do, because we do. I know my department does, to be able to serve customers and working in coordination with the customer service department. But I'd like to think that some of the customer experiences we have overcome, and we have more investments to make, especially in our network, but specifically in the internet side. So we contributed to some of the scores here. I think we're turning some stuff around, and the timing of this, there's never going to be a great time to do this, but for my staff, we've moved that one head end one time in our careers here, so we're not going to ever do that again. So I think it's a contributing factor, but that's my point of view.
Well, and I appreciate those comments, because I think that context is important. This was kind of a perfect storm for them in terms of the potential for there being some issues with changing things over. So I think that is important to bear in mind, and I'm happy to point that out in the final version of this report to reflect that, if that's the will of the board.
Do we have any sense of the nature of the trouble calls that were called in, and are they correlated to the transition for the head-in building? Do we have any sense of what that percentage is and what that overlap is?
I would need to look at the data a little more closely. I am able to look at it on a month-to-month basis, and I did look at it on a month-to-month basis as it was being conducted, but I wasn't looking at it with an eye to that question.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to go back and see if there has been a shift over time with regard to that. I'd be happy to check
I
that.
think one other point that you can draw from John's comments, look at the context of all that's going on. The issues John's talking about, moving the head in, people calling in with problems, and yet the folks up front, the people that are handling the calls day to day, talking to the customers day to day, they still get such high marks in this. So I'd like to, tell those folks that they do a great job.
Yeah, I think it's an important
When you
point.
look-
There's the rating of the customer service experience, and then there's a service rating. It's a separate thing.
Especially when you look at, those folks are handling that discomfort, for lack of a better term. And when circumstances improve, like John said, when these changes take place, I think you'll see even better marks.
Then too, our CSRs have been in such a crowded situation in our old location. Not much confidentiality there when customers come in, especially if they have sensitive subjects, payment arrangements and so forth. And that's been a factor, Ms. Comer. And we hope that will be cured or diminished greatly with this new location, because it's been designed to be more customer friendly and more accessible and more private, confidential. They come in and talk to CSR without anybody else overhearing them talking about their financial situation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we
Monique gave me a
think we're moving
tour.
in the right direction.
And I was very impressed with the facility, and you could certainly see that there was attention to making sure that customer does have privacy, and I think that's an excellent point. Do you have any other questions that I can answer for you?
I have a couple. If I understand the way you collected your sample set, you've got a weighted sample set based on the types of calls that you got inside. Do you think there's a qualitative difference between taking that approach to your sample set versus actually having separate sample groups for each call type?
You can do it either way. I mean, we just set quotas. They would randomly select, and then they would adjust it if necessary, which they really didn't have to adjust much. I mean, if you're really good at drawing your sample and doing it at random, you shouldn't have to adjust much. So we didn't pull those out separately. We just chose to do it that way. I have not noticed that there is a significant difference.
So you don't think there'd be any more insight into any individual type of contact based on having a larger sample set in that contact type?
Another option, obviously, is we could have interviewed, 50 of each and then weighted the data to be proportionate at the end. That's the reason I did want to make sure that I spoke to 30, so that there is some benefit to interviewing at least 30. There's some statistical significance that goes along with that. But we chose to look at strictly proportionate, so that it would be reflective of all the customers who have that experience.
And touching on Hance's comment a little bit, do we feel like this data gives us a better sense of customer service representative performance versus actual service level delivery? And I guess
Yes.
where I'm going with that is, could we improve that latter by having a sample set that wasn't from an actual customer engagement where we were actually doing outreach?
Absolutely. I mean, this was always intended to be a transaction survey. We did include the questions at the latter part of the survey because I feel like that's really important to understand how people are viewing the utility. That really provides insight to that experience. So I lobbied. In fact, initially Monique said, well, we really don't need that because this is a transaction survey. But I think it really helps to better understand the experience and the view overall and how those two things are interconnected. So certainly the intention was it to be transaction. I've conducted many what I call customer satisfaction surveys, where you contact people at random regardless of whether they've had a transaction. That's a different type of study, but you do have the opportunity to go into a whole lot more depth with that. So.
And then, our general rating there around 70% overall. Can you give us some sense of, with other clients?
Sure.
What's a high and low? Where do we set in that?
You are probably sitting just a little bit above average. Usually low to mid 70s is pretty typical.
So what would a low range be? What's a low fence and a high fence? How big is that span? Is it 90%
I have
to
seen
50%?
people who scored in 90.
I see.
That's about the highest I've ever seen, and I've seen people who've scored in the 50s.
I
So 70, 72. A few years ago, a little bit about my background. I worked for 23 years for a marketing and research firm, and we did work for hundreds of utilities. And at that time, I kept track of all the averages and so forth. And 72 was pretty standard as an average. So I would consider your scores to be a little bit above average.
Okay.
I did want to point out the American Customer Satisfaction Index because that's a nationally recognized yardstick that you can compare to with regard to overall customer satisfaction.
And in that range with your other clients, does that midpoint, is that also about where the plurality is?
Yes, typically, and again, we use, over the course of my career, I've used 4-point scales, I've used 10-point scales, I've used 7-point scales, I've used 5-point scales. So you've got to figure out, but typically, yes, your plurality falls in that upper end. Like if I'm looking at a 10-point scale, I'll look at 8s, 9s, and 10s, and those typically are going to reflect about the same as if I look at 6s and 7s on a 7-point scale. Then you'll usually have, a smaller percentage in that next tier, and then the low end of the tier. If you're under 20% with that, then I feel like you're in pretty good shape.
And how does that plurality work with that ranking among your other clients? So if we're at the 70% kind of mark, are the biggest group of those guys floating around the average midpoint that we're at, or are they pushed more towards the 90% or more towards the 50%?
Well, like I said, the average is in the 70s.
Okay.
So I mean, it's the true average.
Okay, so it actually is the average. It's not just the middle of the range. Okay,
Right.
Great.
Ms. Comer, and I think Monique, you and I talked just real briefly. You've done this work here, and you included like all the comments from the customers and everything. So you've seen a lot of these. You've been involved in these, Monique. So what's the next step for us? If you're giving us a game plan, you or
Sure.
Monique going forward, where should we go from here?
Well, I think what stood out to me was the issue with wait time. People are dissatisfied with the amount of time that they have to wait, and that's kind of a double-edged sword. Because you can tell Monique, you need to be faster, but then you're going to see your scores go down in terms of they listened to me, they were professional, because I'm guessing that she tells her employees, you need to take care of these customers and make sure that you are answering their questions and treating them professionally and treating them with kindness, and that's going to take some time.
Does that mean
So-
there's a wait time primarily on the phone too, right? Not necessarily the in-person.
Right.
So basically,
That was, there was definitely a huge difference in terms of wait time if you walk in the building versus on the phone.
so are we understaffed?
That would be a question that I think you would definitely need to ask yourselves.
But
Is
if I was
it a
asking,
staffing issue?
but if I was asking you, are we understaffed?
It's either a staffing issue or a technology issue. Having the benefit of reading these comments, the customer doesn't know that. The customer only knows I had to sit on hold for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the case may
We have been in
be.
the process of trying to hire 2 people since November, I think.
So during most of the study, we were understaffed.
Correct.
And even during these 2 positions, our CSR staffing could be at approximately 15, and when we get these 2 new, that'll put us at 12, 13. So, and we should have those 2 people in place by June 30th.
And you've got those people, David, budgeted for her full staffing will be in the budget you present.
Yes, sir.
Well, I like the other point that
They were existing, they're not new
No,
positions.
Right.
They're in there.
Right.
Just vacant.
that Leanne also brought up was solving the problem with technology. And would there be some things, more information on the phone call waiting portion?
I'm sure that you are able to track that internally as far as the wait times and with your system. Is that true?
Yes, we can actually track it, and one of the things that we're working with IT, I met with IT last week, and one of the main things that we're doing is looking at the reconfiguring of the IVR system to allow the customers to get that callback feature sooner, and then also working with IT and marketing on allowing the customer more options with regard to, and more prominently placing the email contact, so that customers know, and then just educating the customers more about how they can reach us versus sitting on the phone and sitting in the call queue, that they can reach us via the portal, they can reach us via email, different things like that.
I'm always reluctant and skeptical to put my number in and then hang up once you've invested a few minutes in it. But I will actually say I've actually tried it, and you all do call back.
Always,
Yeah.
The office closes at 4:30, and if we have calls still sitting in the queue for callback, I mean, our CSRs, like Hans said, our CSRs do a great job, and they're there for the customers as much as we possibly can be there. And we've had days where we've been there till 5:15, taking callbacks, especially on our heavy peak days, like when payments are due, things like that. So they do a great job, and they put themselves out there, and they don't leave until the job is done.
So you're primarily, Ms. Coleman, not to put words in, your primary, based on everything, is from a training standpoint of the staff, you think we're pretty good? I mean, all those things, it's the staffing that's where we're,
The things that stood out most to me were the wait time. There's always room for improvement. When we look at the scores based on the type of transaction, you'd like to see those more level. It is difficult to handle issues where payment is involved. But I do feel like that this allows Monique to see areas where she may have some additional training. I didn't think any of those scores were cause for concern, but my hope is that Monique can take this and say, well, I'm going to develop some training on how to deal with a customer who has a payment issue. And I think, to your point, having more privacy may go a long way towards that. So the wait time was an issue. And the other comment that came from those who were dissatisfied with whether it was the transaction or the quality of work performed, really there were lots of comments about lack of follow-through. Now, I can't elaborate on that too very much because, we didn't have lengthy conversations with them. But a sense of this took longer than I thought, or I didn't get called back as quickly as I thought. So that would be another area that I would think is an opportunity to improve.
Okay, any more comments or questions? Anything for Leanne?
No.
Anybody in the staff have any questions or comments for Leanne? Not, we're being asked to consider accepting her report. So do we have a motion to accept her report?
I move we accept the report, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a second?
Sorry.
Second, any discussion about it? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's, motion carries. Ms. Glenwood, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very informative. All right, next item is, this is on advanced metering. Consider acceptance of the FPB electric and water advanced metering infrastructure business case and staff recommendations. So again, we're being asked to accept a report and some recommendations.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you may recall, at the January meeting, the board agreed to enter into a contract with Vast Solutions to have them perform an advanced metering infrastructure business case study for FPB. Vast was selected to perform this work due to their extensive experience in the utility industry, particularly assisting clients with AMI projects. AMI systems provide a constant two-way communication path between the utility and customer, eliminating the need for manual reading. This automated network allows for many improvements to the way FPB provides services. Some of those benefits include elimination of estimated reads, fewer visits to the customer's property, faster outage response and restoration, and enhanced data presentment to the customers. There's a long list of the many ways an AMI system can improve how we provide service. But in order to fully understand the financial impacts of AMI, performing a business case was a necessary first step. During this process, staff has made every effort to investigate potential deployment plans that will eliminate the need for a direct rate increase to the customer to implement an AMI system. And for that reason, you'll see two implementation plans presented this evening. Number one was a base assumption of beginning AMI activities in the upcoming budget year that was used to develop the business case. And number two, a staff revised plan that was developed based on further understanding of the expected cost of AMI and the impacts on future budgets. It's the opinion of staff that delaying the start of this project until the 2018-2019 budget will allow FPB to phase in the advanced meters after the savings of the new power supply contract have been realized. Mark Michaels and Scott Stein are here with me this evening from Vast Solutions to discuss in greater detail the business case and how we developed the model. With that, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Mr. Mark Michaels, and he's going to go into a little more detail on the business case.
Yes. Okay, great. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for allowing us to be here today with you all. Thanks very much. I'm Mark Michaels here. We'd like to walk you through today the advanced metering business case that we worked in conjunction with the FPB team on. An overview here, what we envision here is the implementation of a solution that basically provides a new platform for FPB to basically re-engage or transform your relationship with your customer and build a number of what we would call operating efficiencies. It also provides an immense amount of data that you can use to help tune things like the way you run your distribution operations, the way that you provide customers with data so they can manage their lifestyles and the choices that they get to make when they're using the services that FPB provides. And I should mention that this is restricted to electric and water. This is not a cable business case as well. So the investment that we looked at includes conversion of all of your 21,000 plus electric metered customers as well as your nearly 17,000 water metered customers. No differentiation between those. It would include the installation of what we'd call an intelligent network, a wireless network, many of which you are already familiar with today because you use those in your personal life as well. And finally, what it includes is the implementation of a data network, a data gathering solution that allows us basically to provide the information that we need for billing, for operational, and for other customer uses. So that's a high-level overview of the investment solution that we looked at for an AMI, advanced metering infrastructure investment here. Project assumptions, and word projects is one term. This is really the business case assumptions that we went in with here for this particular project here. And this is the numbers and the information we're going to provide with you throughout this presentation are based on these assumptions here. So as you can see in the yellow here, what we talked about doing here, basic assumption was to start the project in Q1 of 2018 with a high-level overview of the planning and the technical requirements that we need in order to form the basis for a good selection of a partner that would make sense for FPB. And so Q1, 2, 3, 4 in yellow, we have the planning and project requirements effort. The blue AMI vendor procurement was envisioned to take place in Q1 and Q2 2018. Two other vendors, data analytics in the green, and in the, I guess I'd call it the orange. My wife says I'm colorblind, but I'm going to call it actually gold, the endpoint installation partner. And then starting in Q1, Q2 2019 in the darker blue, that would be our ramp up, our integration period. And then we would begin, that was Q4 and Q1. And then beginning in Q1 and Q2 in the purple, we would do a proof of concept where we would be trialing with the integration, with the planning work. We would actually be implementing, installing a number of devices in a particular geographic area so that we could test the solution. We could test the integrations and all the business processes that worked with that. And that was in anticipation of starting the green bar, which I call FSWD, or just the full system-wide deployment starting in Q3 2019, going for a 24-month period, automating both the electric and the water devices concurrently. And we'll talk a little bit about why that assumption is an important foundation. And then as we get about halfway through, you'll see in mid-2020, we're in the green, we're in full system-wide deployment, we're now starting to use the solution for billing purposes and for operational purposes. So in what I'm going to call that mauve bar, for lack of a better one, we're now starting to do the testing and the transition to operations so that we can now reap the benefits of the solution that's been implemented. And then finally, that orange bar at the end is that really important when we transition from a project or a program. We now hand that off to what we call the sustaining operations, which is going to manage and operate that solution for the next 16 years following the initial deployment, or 18 years following the deployment period. So at a high level, that's the roadmap, or that's the baseline that we worked with when we put together the costs and the benefits for the project. So 24-month rollout is what we talked about in that first bullet. The second half of that, though, is important to mention, is the joint automation of both the electric and gas, or electric and water devices. And the main reason for that is we didn't want to create two classes of service. We didn't want to create two classes of business processes. And in simplistic terms, if everything is automated, we move towards one way of running the utility. If we keep things in a non-automated fashion, we have to do things the way we do them today. We also have to implement the new business processes to take advantage of the technology. So a foundational element is that we would, in fact, go ahead and synchronize the deployment so we could automate both the electric and water metered customers concurrently during this 24-month period of time. The timing of the implementation was synchronized with the transition to KyMEA in Q2 of 2019. And it also included in that third bullet the fact that we would use a third party to help with the meter installation activities, because it's a lot of work in a relatively short period of time.
Could I ask you one quick question?
Absolutely.
Well, you said, I understand the two classes of customers.
Yes.
But we will be running two systems parallel for a period of time, right?
John, you're exactly right, that you have to do that. So during this period of time, we're running the existing processes that you do today to serve your customers. We're also ramping in the new business and operational processes that take advantage of the technology. So if you can sort of envision, we're ramping down the group of customers under the old business processes and we're phasing in the new. So you have a period of time where you're operating both types of business processes.
If you come out with the installer and you put this stuff in my home or business,
yes,
then do I immediately cut over to the new system, or do I kind of lie there idle until more people come on to switch me over? And I've got the equipment, but I'm still running the old way? Or is it like real time? Once I'm up and running, I convert over to the new?
There'll be a staging period from the time that the equipment is installed until it's actually placed into operational service. And one of the primary there's a couple of reasons, but one primary one is to make sure that the system is working as expected, so that when we render that first bill using the new system, we expect it to be right. So we'll, for example, the meter readers will continue to read the devices. We'll compare those with the data coming over the system to make sure that they match. And that's one of the big quality checks that we do to make sure that the system is performing as designed, as integrated, and as expected.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any pictures of what the new meter looks like?
Oh gosh, I wish I did.
Can you describe it, maybe?
Does it have little antennas on it, or?
Pardon?
Does it have little antennas, or?
Actually, it's a fair question, and I should have thought of that. It actually won't look a lot different than the meters that you have out today, because there actually is, in most cases, you won't see an antenna. I'm talking electric meters. It looks pretty much like the same meter that we have today, because the electronics, the radios, and all the smarts behind it are actually embedded right behind. Oops, I bumped it. Embedded right behind the actual meter itself. On the water meters, they're actually going to look similar to what you have today too, because in a lot of cases, and Alan, I'm looking in your direction, you have what I call the little hockey puck antenna, or it's just below the lid today for some of the radio devices that you use today. So I don't think you'll see the customer won't see any appreciable difference on the water technology. Okay, you're stuck behind the column there. I think that was a no. Okay. Did that answer your question? Other than not having your pictures?
That sounds pretty good.
Okay. Okay, great. Going to move on to the next slide. Just so that you have an appreciation, this was a collaborative effort across the utility, and this included all parts of the organization. So with Travis's and Vince's help, we spent time with the IT team, with the customer services, meter reading, water and electric operations. Who am I forgetting here, guys? Finance, David, we spent a lot of time with your team as well here too. And the whole concept there, of course, was to make sure that we got cross-functional input and collaboration through this process, so that when we talk about benefits and we talk about costs, the stakeholders who actually will be part of this project will step up to those. So this was a cross-functional effort that started in about mid-February and wrapped up in early May as we were putting the rest of the presentation together. Project benefits, I'm actually going to ask Scott to step up, and Scott's going to walk you through a couple of benefit slides. Then we're going to come into the cost component after that.
Gotcha. Thanks. And as Mark said, we even talked to the marketing department at Cable a little bit on the benefits and looked for some of those joint benefits as well. The baseline we did on the project benefits, and as we went through the calculations, computations of these to have these numbers present, was a very conservative approach. If we couldn't put a number to it, if we couldn't put a baseline to it, if we couldn't get substantive data behind it, we didn't include it as a quantifiable benefit. We did notate a number of things for qualified benefits, but we didn't try to quantify benefits. So in doing these things over several years, this is one of the more conservative benefit models that we've used. I'll just take you a couple of examples on here, this MR01, and we have very detailed benefits analysis cases that detail the assumptions, what went into it, the mathematical computations that drove into this. But like, for example, that MR01, about 47% of your benefits is the meter reading, staff, services, and vehicles. And that's not to say you're going to displace all of your staff in meter reading. On the cost side of the equation that we worked up, there are certain repairs, field maintenance, and services that they're still going to perform and do to some extent. So in the model itself, we actually took the benefit of the meter reading, but then we applied a cost side for the sustaining operations that they're going to need to do as well. These benefits are the core benefits that equate to about 95% of your model. Most of these are steady state benefits, meaning over the 20-year life cycle, we came up with an annual benefit criteria, and then went across the 20-year life cycle for sustainment. There are some that are periodic. There are some, for example, meter reading infrastructure, hardware and licensing for meter reading, software and applications, upgrades. Those would be a periodic, which we actually phased in at every, I believe it was a 7-year in the model, and only applied those every 7 years. There were some one-time costs that we allocated in here, and like I say, the overall benefits model had, at the top of my head, it had approximately about 20 or so quantifiable benefits that we leveraged. And our typical model comes in the door, and those we met with can tell you we examined several of your business practices and processes, and in many cases just said, you know what, if you don't feel comfortable that we can quantify it, we're not going to apply it. Here's some soft benefits that are important, I think, to realize in some of this discussion here that we've had to point. You'll see the electric water reduced PUC and executive complaints, primarily operational cost reductions, fewer estimated and erroneous bills. Through the AMI system, they're going to be electronic. They're going to be electronic pickup. They're going to generally be more accurate and non-estimated, I guess, readings once we have the system, as Mark says, optimized and validated. So it's going to reduce the potential of estimations or complaints or errors in the system. As well, over time, it's going to reduce those call volumes for you. It's a quantifiable benefit. We couldn't today tell you what that's going to look like substantially for a Frankfort plant board, but it's definitely a qualified benefit. In other business cases, we would recognize some level of quantifiable benefit on that on percentages, but we didn't on this one. Electric momentary blink monitoring and power quality and reliability. We're going to receive some refined blink counts and information, outage and restoration information out of these meters. So we'll be able to take a look and run analytics over the top of it, and look for those power quality indicators. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain the blink monitoring? You lost me there.
Yeah, I mean the functional, I guess, application is that a customer might make calls to the utility and say, you know what, my clock's reset every 3 or 4 days. Something's going on with my power quality.
Oh, I see.
It's not a sustained outage. In other words, it didn't last a period of time.
Okay.
But the meter, the electronic meter in the AMI system will store those unsustained outages, we call them blinks,
Sure.
and be able to report those in. So it's an analytical place to look. If a customer calls and says, hey, I think my power quality is kind of rough, I'm getting, my clock's resetting, we can look in the system and see those data points and recognize that. We talked a little bit about reduced issues. Voltage reduction savings is probably a future qualified benefit that you can apply. Basically what that does, we're going to get interval data off of the system. We're going to get 15-minute interval data off of the electric on a primary level. And we'll be able to, I guess, group substation data and look at the levels that we have on the power output of that data. Are we too hot? Are we too low on the power quality? And try to control some output, voltage output out of the substations for some conservation efforts if we need to, while still maintaining the power quality level we need for our customers on the reliability. We did find one cable in here, and speaking with the cable folks, that sometimes there are investigations and cable investigations that are due to power outages. And that process starts before the known power outage, I guess, is somewhat communicated. So the power outage indicators from the meters that come through, and I'll call it near real time, we'll be able to get that information over and be able to filter some of those efforts and know that they're due to electric power outages. So if there are any questions on the benefits, I'm going to pass it back over to Mark here.
Before you go, you mentioned a lot of benefits that you couldn't quantify, so you didn't include them. Can you give me some sense of what types of benefits we might see once we get a little further down the road?
Yes, this is kind of the subset list I pulled out initially.
Oh, so you just converted those to soft benefits?
They're all soft.
I see, okay.
We have no numbers behind these.
Right.
The numbers that we have, that we used for the business case, that 36.4 million roughly, 95% of those are right here for you on the hard dollars.
What about load management? Was there any thought put behind?
On distribution load management? Yeah, we had conversations on that. We didn't quantify a benefit around load management, but definitely there are some benefits in understanding that interval data, right? And
Right.
load profiles.
Yeah. And along that lines, I mean, should we be thinking concurrently with this about what types of load management programs we may roll out to coincide with this?
Yeah, I'm going to probably defer to Vent on that one.
I guess what kind of our thought process in this was, number one, this is going to be, to do something like this is a major change.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you get too many moving pieces going at one time and you mess up your cash register that keeps the utility moving, you would have massive problems. I think our opinion would be, and I'm taking R as in staff, our opinion would be that we would do the basics of what we're talking about and make sure the system's running and well done, and then move to some of those benefits afterwards. We took a very conservative approach, again, as they're kind of talking about, they talked about benefits at other utilities, they may put some numbers on some of these things. Our whole opinion was if we could show this to be a positive business case with absolutely a conservative case, we would be very, very confident that we will be that in real life. So that was kind of our assessment here. So those other, I mean, there's a ton of technologies you can add to this. I mean, it's certainly a game changer, your two-way communication with these things. If you start to, there's just so many things that you can tack onto this and start to change your operations. You know, I would hate to get too much of a bite the first time in the whole system. I've seen the Frankfort plant where we do that in other operations where we try to do almost everything at once and you never really get the system going well. So that was kind of our staff's mindset on maintaining it to the core functions and then expand.
Was there any discussion around pay-as-you-go to try to minimize cutoffs and that type of thing?
Prepay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did have discussions around prepay. I think that is a motivating factor here at some point, but back to Ben's point. A typical best practice for deployment of these is get the core functions back operational, integrated, reliable, that you get your core meter to cash and billing functions working well. Your deployment is going to take approximately 2 years. And you've got another probably X number of months to refine the network, optimize the network, get everybody's meters online, reliable, and converted, if you will, in the system. In the meantime, there's a concept of a data warehouse or analytics system as well that Mark alluded to at one point in one of his slides. So you've got a data collection, you've got an analytics and data warehouse. We're capturing all this data as we go. But those analytics, you want to put them over the top in a second phase and know that you've got the billing and the core meter to cash and the core competencies for your customer base are meeting the need.
Can I ask you one question? Especially our friend here from the State Journal. If he writes a story tomorrow, and I'm the average customer here in Frankfort, I pick up the State Journal, and I look at it and say, why don't they just leave me alone? Why are they doing this to me? What would you tell them?
What would I tell them?
Mm-hmm.
I would
you
tell them.
meet them at McDonald's, they're saying, why don't they just, my meter's fine, my water's fine, I turn my switch, the electric comes on. Why are they doing this? What would you tell them?
The reliability of the system and the automated system to deliver your billing accurately every month without estimations is one of the largest customer benefits. The outage information, restoration, and being able to leverage that outage information without getting customer calls will result in some response time improvements.
So if I go off at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm still asleep, they would know I'm
They
out.
know, they know you're out. Your meter is sending a message that they're out. Again, that takes all back office infrastructure, right, to complete that closed loop, which is what we're referring to in the follow-up phases from meter to cash. But definitely they'll know that you're out.
Does the backup systems and what has to go on in the back office all include in your cost estimates?
It is.
Okay.
It is. Resources, support resources, and that's what Mark will run through for you now.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you have something to add to that?
What does the back-end analytics thing look like? Is that typically an off-the-shelf solution, or is that just an OLAP tool that we end up having to customize a lot, or how big of a task and how dynamic is that once that comes along?
So for Frankfort Plant Board and your requirements as we know them today, there are off-the-shelf systems and solutions. We've also talked to folks about building them here, because you already have some of this functionality built into your cable system services, right, which we could leverage, which is a little different than many utilities. And in some cases now, the AMI companies themselves are adding analytic engines on top of their data collection systems. So there's various ways, I guess, to get that application, I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's various ways to get that application. And really during that AMI, let's stand over here. During that AMI requirements phase, that's exactly what we do.
And so does that imply
Just nail down those requirements.
Does that imply about the metering data that it's likely there'd be a SaaS solution that we'd be dealing with for the metering data, and so our customer data would be leaving our control?
No, not necessarily. Could be in-house. It doesn't have to be a SaaS solution. There are SaaS solutions out there, but it would be more. You'd have that choice in that option. And look at that. I think what we need to do is, again, the requirements we examine here are at a deep enough level for the business case, and we focused a lot on quantifiable, right, benefits and what meets that quantifiable need. And so your requirements in the space for analytics are very low to meet the base needs of this benefit case. So we'd want to look at those requirements, extend them out for your roadmap vision, and figure out where we want to bid those, if you will. Maybe initially to the AMI vendors, see what they come back with, and then work with your IT group and look at some off-the-shelf solutions as well.
So is this actually a fiber optic connection, or what transmits the information? Is it?
The meter to the network?
Yes.
Yes, it's the prominent solution out there right now is a fixed wireless system. I guess in some ways very similar to your cell phone type of a system. It's a different frequency band, but it's about the same.
Okay.
They have a couple of technologies underneath that they apply, but it's not much different than like your cell phone connections.
What's the density of those fixed wireless access points and the backbone behind connecting all those together?
Depends on the technology and the vendor for that technology. They have. Yeah, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so
Sure.
depending on the technology, there's one of the popular technologies that's out there will place a series of towers in the geographic area. The towers will talk directly to the meters wirelessly. So that's one prominent technology that we've worked with several customers with. Another one that I think you may have been alluding was the meter-to-meters type that also will communicate with each other until they hop up to a device that would be mounted typically on a power pole. And that one would be maybe in the neighborhood of, say, one pull-top type device maybe every quarter to half a mile as an example of that as well here too. So again, without getting into the details with the team, we know what the cost parameters are for those different types of solutions, and the business case has the flexibility and the dollars built into it so that when the time comes and the team goes through the detailed requirements and asks some of those types of questions, we can then move towards through the bid process to determining what is the exact correct technology that would best meet both your water and your electric needs. Yes.
And one other,
Sure.
I know 16, 18, and 20 years were talked about. how long do these units last?
It's a great question. So from a business case standpoint, in fact, David, we were talking about this just before the meeting itself here. Our software is depreciated on a 5-year schedule. Our computer hardware is depreciated on a 4 to 5 year schedule as well. The communications network is depreciated over a 10-year schedule, but we have some money in the project to refresh it and kind of think about, with the cell phone that most of us have here, we started out with probably an older flip phone at some point in the past, and now maybe we've migrated to something else. We would need to make a small incremental investment about every 10 years in the network itself at the pole top level. But the meters and both the water and electric meters those will go for 17 to 20 years. Okay, so that's, I think, maybe where you really wanted to know. That's the major investment here. And we have a lot of history and information about why those are reasonable periods of time. And we've built into the business model the maintenance of those devices for that full period of time as well.
And I expect the cost of some of this hardware will come down over time. Right?
It has. If you were to turn back the clock, Scott and I have been really lucky. We've been able to be part of the industry since about 1996 and 1997, and you just made the understatement of the day. We never dreamed sitting here today, 20 years ago, that we would have the ability to talk two-way down to the electric meters, and it's now cost effective to do that. Of course, the cost effectiveness also comes with size. So Frankfort will get some advantages cost, but you're probably not going to get the same ones as a utility with 2 million meters. But nonetheless, you'll reap the benefits of the latest technologies and functionality, we believe.
Travis, I think several months ago, you'd mentioned that things are much cheaper now than they were, and that we've benefited in a sense by letting the market kind of mature a little bit. What's the market look like now? Is there going to be another bump down to where you even see bigger drops, or is it flattening out, or?
I think I'm not sure I could speculate on that, to be honest with you. What I can say is where the price points are today, from a cost standpoint, with the benefits model that we have, they tell a story that we think is very compelling in terms of returns on investment and payback. And to the extent that those costs would go down, then certainly, that just makes your business case and your investment look that much better. Yeah. I'm not sure I could speculate where it's going to go. I'd like to see it go down. It certainly has over the last 10 years. But
well, I guess what would really be a real quick and easy answer is the number of vendors making the equipment increasing or staying the same?
Good question. There's been a little bit of consolidation in the industry, but there's a high degree of competition. There are 4 or 5 major vendors that are all competing for your business. There are 3 or 4 smaller ones all competing for your business. So when you get to the point where you go through the procurement process, I believe you'll get very good and competitive pricing and a lot of interest. In fact, we've just socialized out to some of the vendors that you all are looking at this, and you're going to have to be careful. You're going to be knocking the doors down. There's going to be a lot of interest, because in this part of the market where you're at, there are a lot of customers like yourself, and all of these vendors are used to doing these big projects, and they know that to be competitive, they've got to continue to address this size in the marketplace. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in this space. Something I skipped over, because I think I skipped over the slide actually accidentally. I just wanted to point out 2 things or 3 things in the model. As we mentioned briefly, it's operationally based. Okay, so one theory is to go ahead and talk about things like time of use or time-based rates and other types of aspects for creating value and benefits. This one is all about operations, and all the benefits that Scott talked are operationally based, and that's a really important distinction. There are some that will base a lot of their business case on those futuristic benefits. This one's rooted in operations. The second thing is the costs are conservatively modeled. We've got a labor escalation of 2.5%, materials escalation of a couple of percent in here, starting with fairly high numbers to begin with. So we've got a lot of confidence in the cost part of the component of the benefits case and the business case. So here's the numbers. Here's what they look like here. So what this slide is designed to do, I'm going to walk over here just so it makes it a little easier. The upper part and the lower part are both the deployment period, with the primary deployment of the devices themselves in the models taking place starting in mid-2019 and completing in mid-2021. The project, though, as illustrated earlier, starts in Q1 of 2018 with the procurement effort. So what this view of the world tells us is that in order to go from where we are today to a fully implemented and operational system, the capital requirements are just under $9.6 million from January 2018 through mid-2021. There's a small maintenance and operation and M&O component, which is relatively small, of about $360,000. So the total cost for implementing the project to get us from zero start to fully operational, converted to operations and revenue billing, is just a little over $9.95 million. And this is what we call the deployment period, and you'll see these numbers show up as we go through some more of the financials in this presentation itself here today. Okay, so here's our same numbers represented two different ways. So here's our deployment period costs right above. So here's our 9.594 capital. Here's our 357,000 M&O. There's our 9.95. So this is the first 3 3/4 of 4 years of the project. But the project goes on for another 16 years. And as you can, and probably not a huge surprise, we don't really add a lot of capital over the next 16 years in the core case. We go from 9.594 to just a little bit over $10 million. And this is the refresh of computer hardware and some of the communications equipment. Where you do see the significant expenditure is out here. We now have to operate this investment, right? So we put in computers, we put in servers, we put in information systems and applications and meters. We have to maintain those. So when you add up the deployment costs in capital and expense, the total cost, and you're going to see this number pop up in the next couple of slides, the total cost of the project is 16.536. And if you thumb back to Scott's slide here, the total benefits of the project are in excess of 36 million. So think 36 million benefits, think 16.5 million in cost. Those are the two primary numbers that come in and out of the business case and lead to the next slide or two that you have seen in your slide deck here as well. And so so there's our $16.5 million, we call it the 20-year cost for the life cycle cost. We've got the life cycle benefits of the 36 million that we just saw. We've got an NPV today of about 8.4 million, but here's what we get over the 20-year project here. We get a return on our investment of about 17%. If you look at it at the 15-year period, it's about 15%, and at the 10-year period, starting in Q1 2018 out 10 years, it's at 8.9%. The interesting number from my perspective is the simple payback. So simple payback, I think I've got it in the next slide. Okay, so the blue is the aggregation of our benefits. The red is the aggregation of our costs. So simple payback says that right here after we finish the core deployment where we've incurred most of our big time costs up front, and then we look at the accrual of the benefits over time, the intersection of those two where the net benefits or the accrued benefits and the accrued costs cross each other and cancel each other out here is in May 2026. That's just under 5 years. So we finished the project in roughly mid-2021, and just a little under 5 years later, we have paid for with the accrued benefits all of the costs up to that point in time. That's the definition of simple payback. And I'm looking over you, because you know that one he's given me. I think I got that one right. So in essence, that's what the slide before is telling us here then, is that our simple payback is about 5 years after completion of deployment, or hitting us somewhere in the middle of 2026. And we're excited about that number because, as Scott has indicated, the costs that we use are conservative. We have a lot of costs put into the model. Our benefits are very conservative. We have a lot of benefits that we think you will achieve, but we didn't get the team to sign up for and we didn't press for. So low on the benefits, high on the cost, and that's what the model is telling us at this particular point in time.
What's typical, of other ones you've done?
So one of the big factors is depreciation. Another one is the fact that you're not an IOU. IOUs have a tendency to pull things forward and accelerate the depreciation, but they also have a lot more cost because they're bigger. A lot of utilities are very happy if they can get their overall return back in 7-8 years out after they've started to complete the project. They're all forecasting, I'm telling you, that if they could get 10 to 11% on their investment, they would be thrilled to that as well too. You're a different entity. You're not an IOU, and so the way that you treat and look at financials, and David, I'm going to hand it over to you, is very different here as an IOU, non-IOU, as an IOU would look at it as well.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I mean, I think the numbers speak for themselves, and I definitely don't know what other entities look like, but this all appears to be a good case, and I'm definitely very conservative in nature, so I like the idea that we've tried not to quantify things if we really don't know. So.
And with that, if there are no more questions, or are there any more questions? Because I'm going to turn the mic back over to Travis at this point. There you go, Travis. Thank you.
So as Mark and Scott have mentioned with AMI, long project, lots of different options, lots of moving parts and pieces. Trying to take it one step at a time. What we're asking for this evening is, number one, to approve the business case, accept that we were thorough in this process and that our numbers make sense. And number two, to accept the the staff revised deployment plan, which obviously, as you can see, looks very familiar. What we've done is we took the base case assumptions, which assumed we were going to start this project in Q1 of 2018, and we've pushed everything out 1 year. And if I can go back to this cost slide here. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. When we started the business case, we didn't really have any idea what AMI is going to cost. We didn't know what our deployment plan would be. Didn't have an implementation plan. At the end of the business case, we get these numbers back, what our capital contributions are, what our M&O contributions are going to be. We took these back to electric and finance, and we said, okay, let's put these in the budget, and what does that look like? Basically, I think we as a team all agreed with the unknown cost of the reservoir, some of the uncertainty with the new power supply contract. We're not going to know our rates until at some point next year. Despite being a strong business case with a good payback period, it's not a good investment for this immediate budget. It makes better financial sense to push it out 1 year to start in Q1 of 2019, which would be, we would start the planning and procurement in that Q1 of 2019, which would obviously be not this upcoming budget, but the budget thereafter. So that's why we've revised these start dates. It's not, don't want to present a contradiction. I think we're all on the same page here. It was more due to the fact that, okay, what's this going to cost? Let's assume we're going to start right away and see what the costs are. Once we establish that, we think, okay, it makes more sense to wait 1 year. And that's how we arrived at this. So as you can see here, we'd be starting, planning and procurement would start in 2019, and then we'd transition to full-scale operations in the kind of July timeframe of 2022.
As I understand it, David, we wouldn't be budgeting any money in the budget fiscal 17-18.
No,
we
sir.
wouldn't have to put any money in this.
No.
And then I think, Vint, your assumption's been that if everything rolls out KyMEA like we expect, that from a customer standpoint in terms of cost, and that the KyMEA savings from a customer standpoint, what they see on a bill, they in essence wouldn't get an impact, a cost increase as a result of this. Is that right?
That's correct, and that's a big point with the backup here is exactly what you said, what we expect from KyMEA. We won't get rates from KyMEA until 2018. All things are looking very positive. We have no reason to believe they're not going to be, but this would give us the ability to actually, before you make decisions and get into a situation where you're writing a check and you don't have the money coming in, this would give us some time for the KyMEA savings to start to materialize. And certainly before you would make larger payments, I think if you looked at some of those other charts, you're looking at over $2 million in the 2020 timeframe. You would have monies available. There would be no need for borrowing. And of course, there would be no rate impact to the customer. Yes, they would say that.
So there's some expectation there'll be rate impact if we start in 2018 versus 2019, or we just don't know at this point.
Our concern is if KyMEA didn't actually materialize exactly as we thought, you could be in a contract situation where you would be required to pay. Then we would be forced into loans, and with our credit rating and I mean, finance can talk a little more to it, but to the credit ratings and some of those things, we would get in a position I don't think we want to be in. So this would, backing it up 1 year would ensure our ability to eliminate a great impact for the customer.
We are really wanting to try to stay debt-free going forward.
Sure, yeah.
It's, in the plan we present to the board, outside of the reservoir and another $1.7 million in investment into our infrastructure, I mean, we're showing in the 5 years, and you could push that out maybe 10, depending on if unless we go down the path of another significant investment in one of the lines of business. Financial stability for the plant board, and also our ability to keep rates. We talk about that affordability, and we have gone through a period. We've reinvested a lot of money into our water treatment plant. We've invested in, and it's just nature of the business of having to reinvest in telecom. If you really look at it on its own, the electric division has no debt on its own today,
Right.
and that's a goal we're trying to keep. That's the initial vision.
Go back a couple of slides here, Travis. I'll show something. Keep going. One more. There you go. If you this again was the original plan. We're talking about moving this 1 year out. If you look in this plan in 2019, $2.7 million worth of cost. We may not have $2 million, $3 million in savings from KyMEA at that particular point. So if you back it up and that big dollar figure hits you in 2020, we would safely have that amount of money. That's a big driver, and it goes along with what David's saying about there's no risk then of having to borrow money or causing a
And I assume
adverse
you'd sleep
impact to the
better.
customer.
You'd sleep better at night, Mr. Denton, if we pushed it out 1 year.
I would, and I'm a ratepayer as well. I would
Yeah.
like to,
Yeah.
to think I could keep my rates low as I possibly could.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing maybe to consider would be, would some customers, say business customers, would they benefit if we started with those earlier? Or maybe
They're still
it
going to get
doesn't
their
work.
power either way. There's definitely, I think we've talked to more of the residential customer, the prepaid ability, but there's we still have questions out there about KyMEA.
Yeah.
One thing that I like as an accountant is certainty, and there's a lot of bit of uncertainty out there. So we are presenting what would be a conservative case that we wait to see that we really truly believe, and you'll see in the budget that you get next week that we show a $10 million decrease in wholesale power cost in year 3 of this budget. We think that's conservative. It could be more. And then that's more options we have. But we could take off down the road of starting in 2018, but
Do we think we're going to consume the entire reserve fund with the transition to KyMEA?
can you say that one more time?
Do we think we're going to consume the entire reserve fund with the transition to KyMEA?
Consume the reserves.
We've got, $4 million sitting out there from the KU settlement that we're holding in reserve for that transition to KyMEA?
We've
Do
got
we think-
2.8
2.8, okay.
2.8 million.
So do we think we're going to consume that entire 2.8 with that transition?
It comes to a cash flow issue. We have in April of 2019, today it's a 45-day difference between when we use power and when we pay for it.
Mhm.
We're going to move to a 15-day turnaround. So in April, say May of 2019, we're going to have 2 KU bill that we have to pay. It's 45 days, and then 15 days after we use KyMEA. So you're looking at $9 million or more in 1 month.
So the answer is yes.
Which is significant. Yeah, we'll
It's
burn
basically
through all
almost
that.
it's almost basically a 13th month in terms of power payments that year.
It is. It'll be
Yeah.
12 months expense on the books, but in cash flow, it's going to
Be
feel
13, yeah.
I mean, you'll see that reflected in our budgets of things. I mean, we're thinking,
Yeah.
trying to make sure we get to that point, and we're not going to have any problem. But it would significantly draw down our reserves to.
I mean, personally, I'd rather have that start date discussion in our regular budget conversation so we can see all that stuff on the table at one time. So we have some sense of what trade-offs we're making.
I think primarily what staff was looking for here was an acceptance of the plan as in it's a quality
Yep.
business case.
Mhm.
And then number 2 is that we include AMI in the budget. And kind of, you have our example, but like you said, we can have those conversations and go from there. Those are the 2 things we were kind of looking for. Just from a personal standpoint, I would like to say that I've been very impressed with our consultants. They really, they dug into crevices I didn't know existed doing this business case. Travis and I in the electric department and some with the water had for years now gone over pieces and parts, and at times it got overwhelming. So I really believe we really spent money well spent here doing this particular business
It
case.
shows
I
in the
think
presentation. It looks really.
I think it'll pay great dividends for us. certainly as we move forward in the deployment, this pre-planning will make a big difference, I believe, in the success of the project.
I think y'all have done a tremendous job
Yeah.
here, just really thorough and thought everything through. And having this type of a meeting, it helps to get the public behind us on this, so the rumors don't start. So I just admire everything y'all have done.
Well, I move, Mr. Chairman, we accept the report. And in terms of what they laid out here, and I think the only issue is when we get into the budget, in terms of do we put any money in 18 or not, but basically I think the report, I think it makes sense to go forward this way, and especially, and just to bring it up to get it on the record, I've talked to Vince several times. LG&E KU recently had the same issue in front of the Public Service Commission, and it was rejected. But they were going to basically increase their customer rates to pay for all this, as I understand it, Vint?
Yes, considerably. A general cost of service study will tell you a lot of your metering costs would be appropriately put into your cost of service or your customer charge, because no matter how much a customer uses, you have the same meter costs. So that was kind of, KU ran into a lot of issues there. They were increasing that customer charge. I think they were doubling it or even more than that at times, and that they ran into a lot of problems there. It does create other issues in the utility. So
And we're avoiding that here.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, there is no rate impact in our particular way of
You
doing
want
it
to
because we're
restate the
funding.
motion? It's really a very simple motion.
What is it?
To accept. The motion that you made was to accept this, was to accept the report and to discuss the budgeting in our budget.
Yeah, that's my motion.
I'll second it.
Second, discussion.
I have one more. Do we have some sense of what the net impact is going to be on staff?
You mean how many?
Yeah, are we
meters do have?
are we picking up staff for the analytics? Are we shifting staff, repurposing staff on the meter reading? Do you have some sense of what those numbers are?
Yeah, actually, what you'll find when we did the analysis and we looked at those steady state costs to run the system, and I'm going to use the term full-time employee, FTEs.
Sure,
Basically, we're going to take a quarter of this resource, a quarter of that one, and what we have in the model is about 1.4 people that would be running the system and managing the system, looking at events and alarms, making sure the data is flowing as expected. But that cost is built exactly into the model, so there's no hiding the ball on that, if you will. So it's like one and a quarter, 1.5 people watching and monitoring and managing the system.
So that's an addition. That's 1.25 additional FTE to our current staffing level.
Well, I'm going to let Vin talk about whether it's additional or not. I mean, we budgeted, we know what the numbers tell us, but how you do that, Vin.
Right. One of our conversations is, we would transition away from the current meter reading department that we have, which is currently 7 employees. A number of those have indicated that, retirement is a possibility that they may look at in the near term. And so we believe that there would be probably 3 employees that would be impacted. So you're looking at probably, in this case, 2 positions created for this with, a reduction in 5 more. So, we come out on the positive side for sure. But we were primarily, what'd you say, 1.5 or
It's about 1.4, 1.5.
It's been difficult to find that 0.4 employee. So
Yeah,
what
it
we're
has.
able to-
It has.
And I think you said, Herbie, with the amount of planning and advanced planning, that those employees that would be displaced, we're going to be able to work it out and take care of them as far as.
We have met with the meter reading department. We went over the report with them. HR was in the meeting with them. But, we've been discussing AMI for a few years,
Mhm.
so I don't think anybody was surprised that, what the business case results came into. So, we expect some retirements, and we expect the 2 or 3 that maybe aren't eligible for retirement to look for employment somewhere else in the company or become the 2 or the 1.4 positions we have in the future.
Yeah.
Do we have some retraining dollars in the business case to?
Yes, we do. There's some retraining. There's some business process work. Those dollars are put into the budget. They're not huge, but they're in there, right? And of course, it means matching the right resource or individual with the right opening, as everybody is aware too. So we didn't actually make those decisions other than putting them in.
Great.
Further discussion? We have a motion. We have had a second. We've had some discussion. Are we ready for a vote, folks? Okay. I think we can do this as a group. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's, why? We've got our report into the records, accepted, and we're gonna talk about budget implementation and the budgeting process. And with that, gentlemen, I thank you. I'm really impressed with when we have consultants and we get advisors on these really important subjects like we've had tonight. The professionalism and thoroughness and everything that you all do, and working with our staff and efforts our staff makes. And it just really tells me that we're on the right track and a lot of things we do.
And Travis isn't half bad either, you know it?
He's the half employee.
He's the
I'll pay for that tomorrow.
That was mean, wasn't it? Okay.
Thank you.
I guess we're ready to move on with the agenda this evening. We have our public comment period. We, at our regular meetings, we always have a little public comment period where public customers or public generally are able to come to our meeting and come to the podium if they care to, and make such comments as they want. Our only requirements are that they come to the podium and to speak, and so that they identify themselves, and they can tell us whether or not they're a plant board customer. They do not have to be a plant board customer. And that they keep the comments in consideration, and keep the comments concise. And do we have anybody tonight that cares to come to the podium and comment? No takers. Okay, all right, nobody. Okay. Next thing is our monthly departmental reports. We can run on through these. First one on our list is website customer comments.
Good evening, Board. We had 2 customer comments about the cycle billing. Customer service addressed those issues. Those are on page 147. If you'll turn to page 148, our trouble call report. We are down at this time, for this time of the month, compared to last year, so that's a good thing. Page 149 is our outage report. We only had 3 for the month, so that's really good. Broken line, lightning damage, and a fuse failure. And then on page 151, our service penetrations. We're a little bit under budget in some of our services, but one bright point was our telephone. We're a little bit above budget. So that's a good thing. Be happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, thank you.
Cable?
Oh, I'd like to add starting on page 152 is a report from folks at Engineering Associates on where we stand on our outside plant study. We're about 75 out of 120 days into it, and you'll see at the on page 154 that they'll be coming back to town sometime. I think it's right about the first week of June or so. We haven't really settled on a date, but that's when I would expect them to come back and do a little bit more research. But I think it's moving along pretty well. We've had some good discussions, and I'm hopeful to get the final product in front of you guys at the July meeting is the goal.
John, you had mentioned originally that you'd hope for some of that information in the budget process.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play in?
It's really, I don't think we're going to be able to do it that way, to be honest with you. And I think that's part of our discussion on June 6th or 7th, or 6th and 7th. We made some preliminary ideas, but we'd like to get your feedback. I'm not exactly sure what day that the budget's actually going to go to them. Into next week? Start next week. So we'd like to get some feedback from you guys, and at the same time, we'll have plenty of time to discuss it when we get in the budget process. I appreciate it.
Tanglewood?
I'll take that one, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
GRW Engineers has been conducting a site survey up at Tanglewood last week and this week. That should wrap up this week. We are shooting for a May 30th date to provide Tanglewood 3D renderings of the reservoir options, and also a plan sheet showing the existing utilities, and we're going to summarize all the fencing options that we have priced in the last few months. And on June the 6th, we are proposing that the plant board will make a vote on the reservoir options as well as the fencing options.
Okay.
So then we'll have all the data. We'll have all the data to the TNAI folks on the 30th, fencing options and the whole.
Yes, sir. Tanglewood has the majority of all the fencing options. The remaining options that we hope to get to them by the 30th is a 10-foot tall fence with brick columns. But in the previous, we provided them 12 or 13 different fencing costs.
I think you were going to make sure Tanglewood knew this time frame, what was coming, right?
Correct. I was waiting on the board to see if they had any comments tonight about the calendar.
I guess my only comment is before we harden up that June 6th date, I'd like to hear some feedback from them, whether that works for them for ingesting that data. And,
Sure.
Week's kind of tight, holiday weekend and all.
Sure.
Customer service.
Good evening again. My customer service reports are found on pages 155 to 157. Some significant things that we noted were that in April we saw a decrease of our call volumes, but that seemed to be offset by the number of walk-in customers we had, and then also the number of email customers that we had. We're continuing to educate our customers on the use of the email option in order to reach customer service. We also noted that some of the things from cycle billing that went on, customers did take to the cycle billing reluctantly, but we have already noticed that our call volumes and also our walk-in customers that we serviced on the 15th of the month, which was this past week, yesterday, due date, were definitely lower than what we have in the past. Of course, we did have an influx of customers on May 1st, people that were paying their April bill a little bit late, and then also our new May 1st customers. We did write a lot more payment arrangements. As of the 5th, we had already written about 63% of what we normally average on a monthly basis for payment arrangements. So we did write a lot more payment arrangements, and we were a lot more flexible with that. And right now, we're just making customers aware and educating customers about our move that we'll be opening our new facility on the 19th. I'll answer any questions you may have.
See, electric.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Mark Harrod, Assistant Superintendent, Electric Department. I'll be filling in for Scott tonight in his absence. If you'll turn to page 158, you'll see the pie chart there that shows all the different outages we've had. We actually did have 39 outages in the month of April. And on the next page there, 160, it shows our 10 biggest outages. So I'm happy to answer any questions pertaining to this that you may have.
I didn't know was in here. What did our SAIDI number turn out for last month?
What's that?
What did our SAIDI number turn out to last month?
I don't have the SAIDI numbers in front of me.
Okay.
Vent, do you have that?
No, I didn't have it off the top of my head, I'm sorry. We'll get that for you.
Did we used to include that in the report?
We did include it in the report. I think Scott still gives it to you. It was in
Yeah, I think
the
he just
draft.
reads it out, yeah.
Transition to this, we weren't able to put that particular graph together anymore, but we'll provide that to you. Generally, if you remember, our SAIDI numbers ran in the 20 to 30 range, and the national average is about 90. And so we were, in some ways, that I don't know if that was telling us a lot. We were doing better, much better than the national average, but it was kind of wiggling in that range. And so we have transitioned to some of these numbers to give you hopefully a little better information, but we'll get that to you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Seaver.
Board, if you'll turn to page 161, you'll see that our numbers for March, we lost $517 on our SEPA energy. 162 is a graph. Typically, it looks like our next opportunity to perhaps have a positive month might be in the summer months when we get a little more for our hydro from air conditioning load. If you go to page 163,
From the inception, we have earned $10.124 million off of our SEPA energy. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions you may have.
It looks like last month was a big improvement over the previous month as far as loss. What do you think contributed to that?
Well, we got $32.81 a megawatt hour, which was close to what the actual average energy cost is showing, $31 a megawatt hour. So actually the market shows that we earned a little bit more, but then you got to take out the OMU and MISO fees, and there's also some loss involved. So basically it comes down to, the market price.
KYMEA.
Mr. Chairman, the last KYMEA meeting was April the 26th in Lexington, and really it was a lot of housekeeping. There wasn't really anything of note that took place, just kind of normal updates that we had on some things. Our next meeting, for the public's knowledge, will be next Thursday in Bowling Green at 10 a.m. Central. So anybody who wants to come out, please do.
That meeting, they're going to discuss some of the renewable energy proposals?
We are going to discuss, at that meeting, I would expect that we are going to discuss some of the higher level aspects to the renewable. The thing that's pressing on us is we need to make some decisions because of some deadlines on natural gas. So that one is actually moved a little bit ahead. That has to have some significant decisions made. So we will have some conversations on the natural gas RFP. And so there will be some higher level conversations on the renewable RFP, but there were 181 proposals, a significant number. So the workload to get both of those completely finished just won't happen, I don't believe, at this board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Safety.
We did not have any OSHA recordables for April. We did have some damage to an electric vehicle with a collision with a deer, so that was the only items to report.
Water distribution. There it is.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The water distribution report is on page 166 through 168. We had 4 main breaks and 4 outages. Answer any questions if you have any.
So the main breaks were aging infrastructure?
1 of them was aging infrastructure. 3 of them were actually a landowner driving fence posts through a water main.
I see.
Not a good thing to do. Water treatment plant. Julie?
Good evening. In April, the water plant treated approximately 235 million gallons of water. That averages out to approximately 7.8 million gallons of water a day. We had average rainfall for the month of April, right at about 3.7 inches. That kept the flow pretty good in the river for us, still at about 7.4 billion gallons of water a day. If you have any questions, anything, I'll be happy to answer.
Admin building.
Welcome to the new administration building. And we reached those words I've been kind of spitting out for the last several months. We have reached substantial completion. We reached that on April 25th. So that means the Marilla has about 30 days to work towards final completion, which all indicates we're right on track for that. So they're currently working on items on the punch list, preparing the warranty documentation. They had to wait until substantial completion before they could actually provide the warranty documentation. Photographs, final survey, all lien releases, just the minor paperwork basically to get to that final completion. All new construction is complete, so right now all work is basically minor repairs that for areas that need some correction. As you know, we have moved a few of the departments over into the new building, and we do plan to move additional employees along with some of the furniture from the downtown office, and that's going to start on May 18th. We'll actually have the moving truck there on the 18th. We're also planning on providing a general orientation for this new building to all employees this week as well. We're going to break it out into 3 sessions. We'll have two tomorrow, and then we'll have one on Thursday morning. What's helpful about having employees in the building now as we occupy the building and start using the various features, we've been coming across, my fellow employees have been letting me know when they come across any minor issues that need additional repair as well. So we've been just developing a list, and since we reached substantial completion, we're now officially in the warranty period, the 1-year warranty after the building's constructed. So now we're kind of in warranty work. So basically I'll send the list to the contractor once a week, and they bring their people out to work on those areas that are needed. Overall, the transition's been going pretty well. As we've been announcing lately, we are planning on moving customer service over in mid-June. So we're looking at being open for business on June 19th as a new facility. I believe that the information went out on the last bill. I believe, is that correct, Monique?
Yes.
And Monique's also working to get a promo video started so we can share the features of the building with our customers as far as the drive-through, the drop box, the more room in the cashier waiting line, and so forth. So we're working on that. I know our Kathy Lindsay will be promoting it out on our social media. So that's where we are today. And just one housekeeping issue: if you do need to use the restroom for employees, you'll need to take your card reader or your key fob with you to get through that door. You'll need to exit, and it'll be around to your left. So if anybody needs to use facilities, that's all I have for my construction update.
I know the city was planning on providing bus service.
Yes,
And-
we are. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was wondering where the bus stop is or how that works.
Okay, we've been under discussion. The initial discussions were we were going to have the bus would stop right there at the intersection of Sauer and Flynn. But I think we're going to get involved in the next city work session, and we're going to have a discussion about maybe bringing the bus to the front door, since we do have the roundabout that size for the bus to make it onto our site. So we're going to have a discussion with the city in the next work session.
Well, it sounds good. The other thing I noticed is if someone decided to walk over, say, from the state building to pay their bill, there's no sidewalk that comes to the front door. You're walking on the sidewalk, at least that I found. You walk on the sidewalk, and then you get to walk on the road with the cars.
Well, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a good point. We have been looking. I did get some quotes for a sidewalk from Sauer, so we can look into that, see if that's an issue. Yeah, you're correct. I thought the bus stop and then people driving, but yeah, you're right. If people want to walk over here, that's something we can look into and discuss.
And is there bicycle parking?
Not designated bicycle parking.
Okay.
That's another thing we can look at as well.
What we're talking about, the
The final transition of the customer service to the admin building. We would like to propose that customer service be closed on Friday, June the 16th, and we will move customer service that Friday, and any work that needs to be done to finalize that move, we'll do it over that weekend. But we'd like to close customer service Friday, June the 16th for one day.
Will we be closed, Herbie, for just walk-ins, or like if someone calls, what will they get a recording, or will they get someone, or what will happen?
Well, we will answer the phone.
Okay, we just won't be equipped for any walk-in traffic.
Correct.
And we've been working pretty well. I think all the departments, the scheduling, working with IT, we're gonna try to take the load off them, move employees early when we can, try to get as much as we can on that Friday. So give employees time over the weekend to get their offices ready and just be ready for business on Monday.
Does that,
Customer service moves, that's when the public will see us as here.
Mr. Chair, do you need a motion on that, or just is that informational, or do you need a motion, or?
A motion would be good.
All right, I'll move that CSR customer service department will close Friday, June 19, with the exception of phone business, to facilitate closing.
That's the 16th.
Correct. June 16th, excuse me, June 16th.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, that's good. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're 2 hours in, and we got a few more things on the agenda. Would everybody care to take a brief recess?
Sure, I'm in
Okay, let's do it. Okay, we're ready to end the recess and start back on the agenda. Agenda item number 7 is an action item. Consider approval of the location for future board meetings from June 2017 until further notice. So we need to have a fixed and certain place for our board meetings, and those will be regular meetings, and anything that diverges from that would be a special meeting. So, anything, Hans, that you need to tell the board on this subject?
The board needs to adopt the time and place for its regular meeting. So I would suggest that the board say the regular meeting of the Frankfort Plant Board will be the third Tuesday of the month at 5 p.m. And the only change will be at, I think it's 151 Flint Avenue at the new administration building. So that's what I would recommend.
I move we adopt that schedule, that motion for all future regular meetings.
Okay, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's, the motion carries. So our regular meetings then for the future are third Tuesday of the month, 5 p.m. at the administration building at 151 South. Okay. Agenda item number 8 is an action item. Consider approving a request for public hearing regarding a retail electric rate increase to be effective July 1, 2017.
Mr. Chairman, Board, I usually don't like to read items to you that's on here, but because it involves the public in a public hearing, I think it would be best if I just kind of read the agenda item to you, and that would make sure we don't skip any information for the public involved. Starting in 2009, Kentucky Utilities, with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC's approval, they instituted an annual formulated rate mechanism. This allows KU to change the wholesale electric rate charged to the Frankfort Plant Board based on KU's actual charges incurred. FPB is notified of the new rate every May and effective date of July 1 of that same year. This year, KU has notified the municipal customers of an estimated 7.08% wholesale rate increase, including projected ash pond cleanup costs effective for energy used from July 1 of 2017. Due to these annual rate changes from KU, and in keeping with good utility practice, the Plant Board conducts periodic cost and cost allocation reviews by means of a cost of service study. These reviews ensure that the Frankfort Plant Board's retail rates generate adequate revenue based on consideration of wholesale power cost, operating expenses, as well as adequate working capital and reserves. Based on the most recent electric cost of service study, which was approved by the board in May of 2013, this 7.08 KU increase will translate differently for Frankfort Plant Board's various customer classes, but it generally moved through to the retail side will be a 5.9% rate increase to the retail customers. Again, it is a little different depending on what the cost of service study says needs to be adjusted, but they're all very close in that range, from about 5.4 up to about 5.9%. Staff recommends the board approve a public notice for the purpose of conducting a public hearing at a special called meeting of the Frankfort Plant Board on June the 6th, 2017 at 5 p.m. at the Frankfort Plant Board Administration Building, 151 Flint Avenue. And again, that June 6th is our suggestion in the working calendar that we saw before.
As I understand, Vint, this is one that KU is passing on to us. It's for customers. It's not us raising our rates ourselves. We're basically having to raise rates to basically compensate and pay KU's bill. They're going to bill us for power, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct. It's a 100% a pass-through. KU is raising our rates almost 3.4 million a year. So that's 100% a pass-through. None of the money will stay with the Frankfort Plant Board, or is it in any way for our operations.
But the pass-through is 7.8, when the increase 7.8?
No, when you pass the wholesale rate through to the different components that it comes out to be,
Okay.
it comes out to about a 5.9. Again, it's a little different depending on, we try to follow the cost of service study that makes sure each customer class is fairly allocated the proper amount. So some of them are slightly off. They're all very, very close, but we make minor adjustments. So you may have one, for instance, residential, we're projecting to be a 5.9. Maybe one of the other customer classes, I think, is about a 5.48 or something is the projection. So they're all very, very close, but I just want to be accurate with customers.
Vint, have you calculated what the increase would be for the typical residential for a month?
Yes, sir. The average residential is about 1,200 kilowatt hours per month. and the average increase would be $6.71 a month.
And that includes an increase in customer service charge and the change in rates, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct. There's a little bit of increase in both.
I move we approve the public hearing request, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that. That would be proposed to have that hearing on,
June 6th.
what happened to it?
The June 6th?
Yeah, June 6th at our regular meeting, 5 o'clock.
That would be a special meeting, I
Special
believe.
meeting, excuse me, special meeting. Okay, all right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Agenda item number 9 is also an action item. Consider approving public hearing notice regarding establishing rates for 1, business telephone features, and 2, business telephone service, hosted PBX. Something new.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We are really excited at the prospect of being able to offer these new telephone services to our business customers. Just to be clear, we're not talking about raising rates on existing services. We're talking about establishing rates for new optional business telephone services. And with that, I'd like to hand off this item to our business product specialist, David Columbia. David has been in this position for 6 months, and he's been working hard to serve the needs of our business telephone, data, and security customers here in Frankfort.
Thanks, Harvey. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, today I'd just like to go through a couple details on the public hearing for full disclosure. I would just read all the features we'd like to add. We thought we'd jump in with a public hearing since the electric department was going to go ahead and have one. So these features are for business customers only. They're just features that Big River Telephone offers us that we didn't have added when we originally did our Big River contract. And so I'll go through those real quick. Just to let you know, it's call transfer disconnect, telebranch services. This is a big one that has come up a couple of times with customers. It's where a business customer, mostly service customers that do like air condition repair, or they want to come to your house and do some kind of service, they'll have a telebranch in, say, Shelbyville or something that looks like a local number when they call. And we can offer that service if we add this through Big River. Reserved telephone number, unavailable call forwarding, complex listing per line, just how it's listed in the phone book. One thing that I'm excited about that I've had several customers ask us about is a VFAX option. You've heard of eFax. It's the same thing, just through us. Big River offers that, and we would do a pass-through with that. There's 2 different options. There's a incoming faxes only and an ultimate VFAX that we've got on there. Like I said, I'm really excited about that. A lot of people are moving away from wanting to have analog phone lines for fax machines, and we want to retain that customer in some way, so this will help us retain that customer in some way. We've got our PRI DID parked. Just somebody wants to reserve a telephone number through our PRI service, they can do that now. PRI line, that is just a business telephone service that we are going to offer. We just offer T1 services now, so we'll have a full PRI line and a way to charge for it. One thing I'm excited about as a salesperson is our T1 and PRI line with existing fiber services. We have several customers that have fiber services with us, that have phone service with us as well, and they want to have a PRI or a T1 phone service, and this would just save them a little bit of money per month. So it'd be a good way to stay competitive with other telephone providers in the area. And the partial PRI is it's a way that I've talked a lot with our wholesale provider about this kind of service. A lot of people want that fiber redundancy through their PRI, through phone service, but they don't want to pay for a full one. They don't need that many phone lines. And this lets us charge per phone line, basically how many concurrent calls they want to make. It's a really good option for smaller businesses. And so that's it for features. They're the service editions, or the hosted PBX is the second part of it. This is what we are really excited about, is offering a voice over IP solution for our phone service. I've had several customers and some staff people actually to talk about, we need a lot of installation staff on the cable side too, saying we need to look at this because this is where the industry is going. And if we want to stay in the telephone business, we need to start doing voice over IP. Luckily, this actually exists in our Big River contract. We have a wholesale cost for it, and we don't have a rate for it for retail for us, for our customers. And so that's all that's here. There's a lot of great options for small businesses, and it's really affordable, and we're really excited about providing that service. I'll go into this more in depth, of course, during the public hearing, but just want to see, do you have any questions? Yes.
Do you have a potential estimate on about how many businesses might be out there that are interested?
I don't. It's almost, options are unlimited right now since we don't offer it. But there are several competitors in town that do offer, and several. I've talked to customers that say there was a local government, the city, just did a voice over IP phone system, but they went with I think a company out of Florida. So something we could have done, business we could have had here, but it went out of state instead. So examples like that, that's obviously a large one. We could do this as small as 1 or 2 phones.
Well, I was thinking more like from the perspective of a business plan, that that there's so many businesses in Frankfort, Franklin County, and how many of those might be interested in your products. So like, are there around 500 businesses and maybe half, or is that something you consider?
I've looked at, I think in my cable telecom list, I've got about 1,500 businesses, and I would say easily half of those would be options. Easily. Anybody who has a telephone is an option. All the way up to large car dealerships or anybody that has lots of telephones. This is something that is manageable, and it's really good for small deployments or up to really large scale deployments as well.
Okay.
David, of course, the service is optional.
Yes, sir.
From our standpoint, do we have to pay for anything to get it in place? Plant board have to pay anything to get this offerings in place, irrespective of how many or if anybody opts in?
To opt in for it, we would do, after we would do this, we would come up with a basic boilerplate contract to bring to the board as well, because every installation is going to be different, whether it's one phone, if it's up to 50 phones, whatever we want to do or whatever the customer needs.
What I was getting at was whether there's any base expense to us that's additional, irrespective of whether anybody opts into this.
There aren't any. We get the wholesale cost from Big River, and then we just pass that through with these rates, and that's built in.
Okay.
And then the device, what I was getting at, the devices themselves, so the actual handset of the phone would be a pass-through cost as well.
Okay.
So the only budgetary concern I would see is if we kept a handful of extra phones just in case somebody's go down. So, any other questions?
Looks like a win opportunity to build business.
I have some customers that are already really excited about it, and the staff's really excited about it.
We were hoping with the switch over on the phones to Big Rivers that this is the type of thing that would come about that we could do. So.
It is, and they're excited about us offering it as well.
All right. Do we have this is actually this is to consider approving this public hearing on June 6th is what you're asking.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to schedule the public hearing, sir.
For June 6th?
Yes, sir.
5 o'clock. Okay. And that leads me to wonder, we're going to have at least 2, maybe 3 public hearings that day scheduled for a meeting at 5 o'clock. Do we need to stage these in some way, Hans, with regard to time or not?
You could all notice at 5 o'clock and then.
Or soon thereafter as can be heard.
Well, we would give an agenda, right, for the meeting, and so they could be listed on the agenda.
Have your it would be just like your regular agenda. The meeting starts at 5, but the item might
That'll be listed. Okay.
might not come up till item number 10 might not show up till 11:30. So
Okay.
I would like to hear get some better idea of what what our alternatives to these services are and what the financial data is behind it before we go ahead down the pike of scheduling a public hearing.
Before we schedule a public hearing?
Because that kind of makes it a predetermined choice that we're switching this away if we already go and schedule the public hearing. I'd like to have some sense of what the economics of it are before.
Well, the hosted PBX service is already in our existing contract with Big River as a wholesale provider. We would just be setting a rate for us to actually sell it.
But then the VoIP service and the things that are new.
That is, the hosted PBX is the voice over IP service.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. So it's already established.
Okay, we have, I think at the moment, we have a motion for a public hearing on June 6th. Have we had a second? I think we've had a second, have we? Okay, do we have a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay.
So the data that we have in our board books, that didn't answer your question as far as the cost of all?
I guess I'd just like to have an idea of what other options are and other vendors might be for the
Same service?
for the same service, and what our ability would be to do that in-house, and what the costs were there, and also what the options were through another vendor.
I'd have to look at our contract with Big River to see if we could do this service elsewhere.
Yeah, I'd have to research that myself. I just don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I doubt it, but let me verify.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't have the public hearing and then that information could be presented at the hearing? Because we'd be at the hearing, we'd be presented the information. We still have the ability to vote yes or no at that point.
Yeah, the public hearing is just the hearing.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the vote.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
But we want to cover that
Yep.
question.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can
okay.
definitely bring you some other wholesale provider options.
All right, so, well, again, we have a motion, we have a second, we've had some discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's. Then the public hearing is scheduled then for June 6th, 5 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next item is number 10. It's consider approving a request for public hearing regarding proposed water rate increase.
The Water Department would also like to have a public hearing on June 6, 2017 at 5 o'clock. You'll recall, Water Department did a cost of service study in 2016. And as part of that study, we reached out for 5 years worth of capital additions, changing the needs of the revenue requirements. And the study indicated that our revenue stream was lower than our revenue requirements. So we didn't want to have a large one-time rate increase, so we planned 5 incremental annual rate increases. This is following lockstep in with that plan. The rates that are proposed are on page 184. The error in that page is the sheet says that the proposed rates would go in effect July 1. That actually needs to be backed up to August 1 if approved. This rate increases revenues by 4.8% overall. That's a little bit lower or higher depending on what customer class you're in. It's consistent with the cost of service study, which provides for fair and equitable rates. It's also consistent with the 5-year game plan for smaller annual rate increases as opposed to a larger rate increase every 3 to 5 years, which is, if you'll recall, that's what we were doing prior to this. We actually had customers come and ask that we consider doing that to minimize the rate impact as opposed to a larger rate increase. The factors that are driving the additional revenue requirements are additional operations and maintenance expense, as well as depreciation expense, a decrease in usage, which we've been seeing this for a while. It's also a national trend, an increase in debt service. The rate impact that we're talking about would be $1.90 a month to the average residential city customer using 4,000 gallons of water. That's 6.3 cents per day. So I'll give you a scale of the rate increase we're talking about. For a 30,000 gallon commercial customer, it would increase $6.25 a month. So, as a matter of course, staff is asking for a public hearing to discuss the proposed rates.
I move, Mr. Chairman, that we approve scheduling a public hearing to consider the water rate increase on June 6th.
Second.
Okay, we have a second, Wall second. Discussion.
I just had one question. There's line 25, FPB gratis water. What is that?
There's been some discussion about that. It's my understanding that this is the rate that we charge for not only like water we would use out of the distribution system for production purposes. There might be some other customers that are included into this. I don't have a clear answer for you tonight.
So this is mainly water that we use in our process?
That is my
that
understanding,
mainly?
yes.
Okay.
And it's not something new, it's always been there.
It's always been there as long as I can
So
remember.
it's an accounting entry, is it right, accounting?
That is-
So-
You know, it's, people think, why would you charge yourself for water? Or why would you charge yourself for electric? But that is the rate we do charge for ourselves. When you look at, and we do cost of service studies, you will not have an accurate study if you didn't pull into account the amount of usage we have electric and water for ourselves. So that is our rate, FPB's rate.
Oh, so it's not water that's part of processing water, it's water used by FPB.
Water used by FPB for anything metered. Now, it does include, you know, yeah, all usage.
Is that,
It should be metered usage that comes out of the distribution system.
Correct.
Into, I'm not sure if it includes a plant board building or not, but say at the water treatment plant, we pull water back in from the distribution system to make the bleach. I would assume that's part of that.
Correct. Anything metered, we have a bill that is just generated just like any other customer bill that we book as expense and including all of our cost of service studies and all that good stuff.
so this, what's the magnitude of that in our accounting? Is it very small? Very
I think
small?
it probably would be.
You know, when you look at, when we have rate increases, it also, like electric, proposed rate increases, you know, we look at pumping power.
Yes.
That's going up, as you'll see in the next budget. Right offhand, I don't have it in my head as to what it is for the company on an annual basis, but it is,
I've got it
it's
right.
quite a bit.
Should have it. So bear with me.
But I guess that it's fair to say, David, from an accounting standpoint, bottom line is it's got to go somewhere. We could not charge ourselves, but then we're still treating that, I mean, that water and the electric still has to enter the cost in the system somehow. So either discount it, we pay it, or we charge it, or we don't charge it, and we have to spread it. But one way or the other, it's got to get to the bottom line.
True, we also have a Kentucky River Authority fee, I mean, just for pulling the water from the Kentucky River that we have to cover as well, so that's all included.
That number should be in the cost of service study. I'll dig it out and I'll send it in an email tomorrow.
Lots of details.
I think that's
Okay.
another thing to think about with the water customers specifically, because we do go to the PSC and rate cases with our wholesale customers, and you need to allocate and make sure those kind of things are tracked for specifically for those outside conversations. Electric does the exact same thing as far as tracking ours with the gratis rate.
See, where we've had a motion, have we not? Or not?
Motion
Yeah.
second.
Second, okay, so are we ready for the call? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's. Hearing stands set. Next item is number 11. Consider approving INSP and MavTV renewals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff recommends approval of the INSP renewal. This is an NCTC agreement with a term from April 1st, 2017 through March 31st of 2020. INSP is on the optional preferred cable tier, channel 164. It is the third most watched network on preferred cable. Staff also recommends the approval of the MavTV renewal. This is also an NCTC agreement with a term from May 1st, 2017 through April 30th, 2021. MavTV is on the optional Sports Plus tier in HD on channel 787. MavTV is the most watched network on Sports Plus. TV Everywhere and Video on Demand rights are included in both of these agreements. No additional carriage requirements or obligations are included in either of these agreements, and the Assistant General Manager for Administration has reviewed them, and it meets with its approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about these two renewals.
So basically, no rate increases.
Yes, sir.
These are all optionals.
That's correct.
That's good. Do we have a motion?
So is there any impact to consider with stations like this on the available spectrum to provide for other services for broadband or any of that?
Of talking about removing these networks from the lineup. You know, I think staff's thought would be that they're, you know, highly viewed enough that the savings would probably not be worth the loss in customer experience. That's why, you know, the recommendation would be to approve, but certainly, you know, that's something to consider. Certainly moving forward on maybe less viewed networks down the road.
Okay. We had a motion, I believe, and we had a second. We don't have a motion. Things
I
are
move.
moving too fast.
I move we approve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, discussions, if any. If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Hearing no no's, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, back to admin again.
I guess
Action
so.
item.
Yeah, I like giving the construction update more than bringing change orders to you, but
Consider approval of change order number 7 for the administration building for an addition of 24,446.
yes, this change order consists of 17 items, which is in your board package, and I can go through these any way you'd like me to. I can go through them line by line, or if you just have particular items you want to ask questions about. Do you have a preference?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, the only question I want to ask, and in the scheme of things, it's a very, very, very small amount. But it really, we had a construction firm, and then we hired a firm to watch the construction firm. And the fact that we had things that in the design or whatever that they had to go back and fix. And like I said, I know it's small, it's pennies. I just don't get it. I don't know why we have to pay them because they missed it.
You know, I understand your concerns, and when I started the project, I thought the same thing. You know, if it was missing design, you know, why are we paying for that correction? But you know, I went back and looked at the numbers, and it ends up being like 0.5%
Oh, yeah,
of
it's
the construction costs. And I think just basically talking to, you know, everybody knows Aaron Nickerson, the architect. You know, he said, you know, I think all consulting firms, they strive to do the very best work that they can do, and with it being a big project, you know, things that they design on paper aren't always going to work out perfectly out in the field when you get out in the field. So, you know, I think he stressed that, you know, we try to do the best job we can, but there's going to be times when those items can be missed. And like I said, I had the same concern, and when it was, you know, it was 0.5% almost of the whole project.
Yeah.
So
And imagine the goodwill if they just covered that small number.
well, the project extended past the original contract time, so they kind of politely reminded us of that as well. So, and fortunately, they haven't asked us for any change orders on the engineering side or design side. You know, they've understood so that's been appreciated as well on our end.
And when it says approved here, does that mean we've already paid this, or is this waiting approval?
It's things that I had to go ahead and approve because we had the people on staff, we had all the materials were on site. If we waited a month or bring it to the board, then we wouldn't be in the building today.
So if we don't approve this, Diane has to take it out of you on payroll deduction?
Yeah. I'm paying for it.
Well, the wonderful thing about the whole thing is we're still coming in under budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the greatest thing about it.
That's right.
And is this it? I mean,
I have told them that this is the last change order for an addition that I want to bring to the
Sure
board.
missed his order.
Yeah, I said, I'm not coming back with an addition after this unless something completely unexpected comes up. But as you see, the building's done. You know, it would have to be something drastic for them to. So I've told them no additional change orders are coming. So this is supposed to be.
and we're holding money for the things that are still left for them to correct, right? Or fix.
Absolutely, yes, and 2 times that amount.
Yeah.
We're withholding, yes.
Do you have a motion?
Yeah, as long as Charmista is on the hook for it, I guess. I move.
She's such a nice person.
Yes, she is. I move. We pay him, sir. Reluctantly, but if.
I'll second.
They need to read it out. Change order number 7 for $24,446.
Okay, we have a motion. I seconded it, so we're ready for any further discussion. If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's, the change order is approved. Okay, getting towards the end of the line here. Let's see. Next item is number 13. It's an action item. Consider approve pre-release embargo agreement for Envision, city and county. The word embargo threw me a little bit here. I didn't know what that was in reference to.
The general thought here is we want to be able to get the information from the report out to the interested parties as early as we can, but there's a complexity there because we haven't actually approved the report yet. So we wanted to get basically an agreement out there that James could draft up that says we'll share this with you early, but you have to wait to share it any further until we actually have a public presentation.
And they'd also be subject to any confidentiality
Right, exactly.
of the data in terms of anything in there that was confidential. They would be subject to the same non-disclosure that we're required to honor.
And that would mean they can't, say, talk to another group that also is confidential.
right.
They just have to stay with them.
That's right. It's just for their organization's use only. So.
Okay. We have a motion?
I move we authorize the board council to prepare and execute these agreements with the parties as identified in this motion, in this action. Yeah.
Sure.
Is this, did we want to add the word "and interested parties"? Because is this where we're going to share with KyMEA and their consultants?
Certainly we can include KyMEA
Yeah.
there as well, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't assume they'd have to be covered simply because.
Yeah, it's a part of it anyway.
But if that needs to be clarified, that needs to be in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a motion and we have a second. Does anybody want to revise the motion? Perhaps.
Yeah, I move that the motion be to authorize the board council to prepare and execute the necessary pre-release agreements with the parties identified here, plus other interested parties, including KyMEA.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? We'll look to James to do this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all in favor,
Especially
say-
since he's not here.
Yeah.
I think it's appropriate that we.
That's right. That's what happens when you don't
That's
come.
right, you get a task, yes.
So, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. Motion carries. General manager's comments.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I got 2 or 3 items. With the completion of this building, we want to start considering and drafting a policy related to making this community room available. So we would like to come back to the board. Mr. Cubine mentioned perhaps in June, but we've got a lot of
Yeah, we'll see.
a lot of
We don't have to hurry on this.
budget. Perhaps we could come back in July with a proposal on how, when, and where, and how we intend to make this facility available to the public.
Yes.
In that proposal, would we be charging a fee, or would it just be they sign up for it?
Staff is most likely going to come back with a proposal that at a minimum would ask for a fee to cover the janitorial services to clean the community room.
And if somebody has to stay after hours to lock up and close, if the meeting's like in the evening and everybody's gone that could stay, and if they have to be here at 8 o'clock to lock up and everything, make sure everything's secure.
I think in general, that's what staff's thinking is to just cover our janitorial services. And we will try to do some research on what other facilities charge to bring that information to the board, and you folks can decide if there's any additional fees you want to include on the rental.
It's interesting that United Bank, former Farmers Bank, didn't have any charges like that.
Mhm.
So,
I think they have a security guard
Yeah,
there
they
all
have-
night.
Yeah, they have 24
They have somebody in that lobby all night long.
wow, okay.
Or at least they used to, I think. They still do, don't they? Or at least,
Probably right, I don't
yeah.
know.
I don't know, one thing that's different from perhaps the farmers' community room is when we rented the clubhouse, there was a kitchen that went along with the clubhouse, and we've got a kitchen facility that'll go along with this, so, you know, there might be a little heavier cleaning involved than just a room. Yeah.
Yeah, kitchen facility that has.
Sharmista's already touched on the fact that we are going to meet with the city commission and try to promote making our turnabout a stop on the city transit system. I think early on, you know, we were led to believe that, you know, that was, you know, feasible and possible, so we're going to try to work on that. My other note was the calendar, and Mr. Baldwin and Chairman Ludwig brought up a good comment that if we provide Tanglewood the 3D renderings and the fencing options on 5:30, it would be a little premature for the board to vote on it 6 days later or 7 days later. So on the calendar you have in front of you, we have us, giving Tanglewood the 3D renderings on 5:30. But I think what that's going to turn into is a meeting on 5:30, because we can't just give them the renderings and say good luck, manipulating them on the computer. We feel like we'll probably need to bring them in here, manipulate the drawings and tell them how to manipulate the drawings and brief them on the fencing options. So I think 5:30 is going to be a meeting, and I don't know that all 5 board members need to attend. So I don't know if you call it a public meeting, or if the 5 board members want to attend, we'll notice it as required.
Hans, if 3 or more of us were in the room, even if it was just informational and they were presenting it and everything, would that be a violation of open meetings?
I think so. I'm not comfortable with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. It opens us up to possible
Yeah.
attack.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we think, Mr. Chairman, you think we ought to notice it?
I think so. That's the safest thing to do. Okay. Any and all are welcome.
Mhm.
We try to be more transparent and all that, and it's in keeping with that.
It'd be just similar to what we did with David Billings when we did the walk around up there at the reservoir at the clubhouse.
So
People would
we will present the renderings and the model and give them tips on how to manipulate the drawings. And our thought is to push the vote on the reservoir and fencing maybe to the regular meeting on June the 20th.
Yeah, I'd rather not deal with the vote on June 6th.
Do we want to think about putting an interim meeting in there to let them come back to us with concerns and have a discussion?
Sure.
We got lots of dates to pick from in there.
Yeah, 6/13 might be a good one. With E3 presenting their report, I think we could add in a discussion with Tanglewood. Well, you better brief Charmista.
That's going to be. I expect both those might be non-trivial amounts of time. Is that a lot to put in one day? I wouldn't want to keep the Tanglewood guys waiting, and the E3 folks are going to be on the clock.
Do you have a thought what you're thinking?
Well, what if how long do you think, what do you think, Walt, how long do you think E3 will take?
Oh, I guess it depends on how much conversation we end up.
I guess what I'm wondering is, for the Tanglewood people, and I know, in terms of them coming, could we literally notice it 2 meetings that day? We pick a time for E3 and then set another time and then let the Tanglewood people come in for a discussion and public hearing, and just set a separate time?
You could do that. For example, you could have you could set your.
Or we could recess till a certain time, couldn't we?
That's tricky.
Okay.
The difference between recessing and adjourning. I
Yeah.
need to go back and look at. There's a nuance between those two terms. They're different. But what I'd suggest, if you think that both of them are going to be fairly lengthy, maybe you have your E3 or your Tanglewood, say maybe at 2, and then start the other one at 5, and that way you have a demarcation between the two.
I guess my thought is maybe we just move the conversational meeting to the regular meeting on the 6/20, and then put action meetings in one of those following after 6/21 or 6/30.
So to leave E3 as a separate.
Oh, we're not actually having a meeting on those days, are we? Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I'm not opposed to having 2 meetings on the 13th and stagger them out so that Tanglewood has a specific time to come.
Yeah.
And they know it, and then if we get done early with E3 or vice versa, whichever one comes first, then
3 in the morning and Tanglewood in the afternoon.
I mean, I would just rather keep them separate. That's just
Yeah.
a lot. That's just a lot of complexity to put on
Yeah.
one day.
What was wrong with the 20th, just having the Tanglewood discussion at our next regular board meeting?
And then have the action on. We would just have to have an action meeting subsequent to that at some point. Versus taking action in the meeting where there's discussion.
So bottom line is, we need an extra meeting
We need
somewhere in there,
extra
either an
meeting
extra meeting on the
somewhere,
13th or,
We talked about having the presentation on the 30th.
Well, I mean, what's the impact of just moving the action to the 7/18 meeting?
on the,
Oh.
So we just do the discussion.
on the Tanglewood?
Yeah, we just do the discussion on 6/20 for the Tanglewood and do the action on the Tanglewood on 7/18.
Does that affect
Is there
That
anything?
just pushes anything with Tanglewood another 30 days down the road in terms of getting the design, getting the
Yeah.
project underway.
Yeah,
At that point, we're half the year.
yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not opposed to having another meeting after that 6/20 meeting. While we're in the rhythm of having meetings.
Yeah.
I'm nervous about delaying till mid-July
He didn't
action on
say
the
that.
Tanglewood. So that's getting out there a little too far.
And that's fine, I don't mind pushing it up. I have concerns with having that much workload on one day, on the 12th. And I want to give the folks from Tanglewood enough time to actually get some conversation together and be able to present whatever their concerns are, and then give us some time to absorb that. So that seems to me we're either adding a meeting after the 20th or we're adding a meeting before the 20th.
So we know for sure that if we presented it to them on the 30th, that they wouldn't be able to have a decision on the 6th? It's too tight?
We don't. I mean, we would have to get some feedback from them to see whether they felt like a week was enough time to get their conversation together. And if that's fine, I think we do 5:30, 6/6, and 6/20 for the Tanglewood. I mean, is it enough to leave that pending and let Tanglewood confirm that that's a comfortable time frame for them?
Well, I make a motion just for the process of kind of getting it resolved. On 6/13, I move that we have the Tanglewood public hearing like at 3, and then we schedule the E3 presentation at 5.
Yeah, I just really don't want to do both those things on the same day.
It's not going to be as bad as the 20th.
It's true.
20th is going to be.
I mean, do you think it's bad that we go back to them and see if they're comfortable with that 6/6 date? I mean, if they're comfortable with a week, that actually moves the whole thing up, right?
Right. Or we could offer them 6/7. One more day.
Remember, you got a holiday in there, don't you?
Yeah,
June.
that's why I was concerned about that time frame in the first part. That 5:30 to 6/6 is pretty short.
Yeah, that's short, and I don't see them going along with that. I see the objections to
Well,
that.
the holiday is the 29th of May, right?
Monday.
Yeah, it's the Monday before.
Oh, okay.
So it's
So that is the
really-
holiday weekend.
Right, yeah.
5:30.
So,
Okay.
so there's the holiday, and then we're talking about
I see.
presenting on the 30th, and then the 6th or 7th would be a week later.
That sounds bad.
Well, why don't we propose that? They want to see the thing resolved as well.
So why don't we go ahead and leave that as a pending, or leave that as a pencil in, and then unless they give us some feedback, let's call the 6/6 meeting, the discussion meeting. 5:30 presentation, 6/6 discussion, and 6/20 action.
Yeah, unless they want
Does that work?
to make a counter proposal.
Yeah.
And if they're not ready on the 6th, then, Mr. Chairman, when Herbie contacts, if they're not ready on the 6th, do we then default to, I know you're concerned with doing two things on the 13th.
Well, and David won't be here either, so I think the 13th.
Your 13th is the day you're not here?
Yeah.
Right. And if you're superstitious, it's bad. So, but I think offering them that option, and they want to see it resolved, so it gives them a whole week after a holiday.
And then we'll also be back together for that meeting on the 30th to talk about any other dates, so we could adjust on the 30th. Since that's a special meeting, we can just put the final schedule on that 30th meeting agenda.
Now, what day now?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is we can go ahead and get feedback from them now on whether they're comfortable with that 6-6 meeting for come back with us. And then we could have an agenda item on that 5:30 meeting to potentially change that.
Except that 5:30 is not a meeting.
I thought we just said it was gonna be a special meeting because.
Oh, that's right, we gotta
Yeah,
notice it,
yeah, yeah.
and show up if you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then we could take action on the 30th to adjust it if the 6 doesn't work.
But it's a presentation
Yeah,
meeting that we
yeah.
wouldn't be voting or anything.
Right,
we'd be
it's just
presenting.
informational.
Yeah, and we could just add that as an item, and if we do it, we do it, if we don't, we
Yeah.
don't.
Okay, so we have a public meeting on May the 30th,
For the presentation.
presentation. Then we, on June 6th, question there is whether or not we act.
Right, we have a proposed meeting for the 6th, and then an additional agenda item on the 5:30 meeting to potentially change that 6th.
Okay. Okay.
And then the 20th for the tentative action on the results of those other two.
You got that, Kathy?
I've got 5:30 meeting for the presentation and potentially change to 6:68. 6:6 meeting tentatively with TNA to discuss, and then we'll take action
On the 20th.
on the reservoir
On the regular
fix
meeting.
on the 20th meeting. That's what I've got.
Yeah.
We're all on the same page.
There we go.
If possible, I'd like to avoid going all the way into July for decision.
I agree as fast as we can, but I
Yeah.
wanna make sure everybody has enough time
Yeah, I
to
understand. I
ingest
agree,
the,
sure.
yeah.
Can this be
I can,
revised
yeah,
and
I will
circulated?
revise that in the morning. I'm only here half day tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll do that first thing in the morning and make sure that that gets revised down.
Okay, do we have anything else this evening? Keeping in mind it's a special meeting.
One other thing, I wanted to update the board on our ethics committee.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Weedman has received responses from 3 folks willing to serve on the ethics committee, and Hans and James need to follow up on the feasibility of those 3 individuals.
And that feasibility is to make sure they don't have any incompatible offices or conflicts or.
That's correct. I've not seen, I need to see their the request letter.
Mhm.
Yeah, I need to see their resumes and that kind of thing, but if they don't currently hold an office, then that kind of simplifies the process because there's nothing that's incompatible with that point.
Right.
We should have to see their resumes. Had 3, once they had 3 people.
So
I think it's pretty good.
if you look at them and there's no issues in regard to that, then when would you foresee, Mr. Chairman, the names come before the board? Because apparently we've got, 3 who are actually said they would, you sent letters out to multiple people and 3 have actually come back and said they would serve, right?
Yes, sir. And the deadline was passed too, we had a deadline in the letter for those folks to respond to Mr. Lehman. And so that's the, pool of what you have now. So if those folks are, which I'd say if they don't have a current office or board membership someplace that would create an issue, that'd be a pretty simple process, I think.
Since we're only down to 3, is there maybe an opportunity to expand that pool a little bit?
Well, pool that we did, pool, I can't remember how many names we had, about
12.
12 or something,
Yeah.
names. And we sent letters out to all those folks to say, if you have interest, please submit your materials to Mr. Lehman. And of 12, there's 3 people that came back.
I guess my question is there anything precluding us from maybe adding a name or 2 to that list?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You would want to, that's, you kind of send them out in the first round, I guess if the board wants to continue to take nominations in a way, I guess you could extend the
Did we set a size to the committee?
It's
Number?
the ordinance is 3, or it's 3.
3, okay.
I think it's that 3.
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, I guess to me, before we expand it, we ought to determine if the current 3 are acceptable. I mean,
That'd be my 2 cents worth. It's the board's pleasure as to what, you've got 3 people that are interested that we sent, that the board submitted names to. And go through the steps with those folks. But like I say, it's the board's, it's the board's
Mhm.
subcommittee, and the board can govern it however it sees fit.
Well, if it looks like there's nothing incompatible, it could go on the agenda in July for approval.
Mhm.
But like I said, don't have offices or board memberships, that's
Okay.
pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah. Quick answer.
We got so much on June, I just soon wait in July to act on it. Not that it's that major.
One final note, we heard tonight from Comer and Associates related to customer service survey. Our plan is to review the document in more detail, and we will come back to the board probably in the July meeting with an action plan addressing the customer service survey.
I think we did really well considering all the factors that were brought out by staff tonight and board members during that time frame, which was the measuring time frame there, that I thought we did quite well. And, but now with the new facility and we can do even better.
What's Herbie? What that study cost us? Do you remember?
19.1.
I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, once we get situated here, we get everybody in place, and we look at the action plan, and we have everything underway, and we've worked through some of the tougher patches on transitioning on the new building, I don't know what it would cost to go back and revisit a portion of it or whatever to see if there's been improvement in that area after we implement and we get here and we see what, we give a little time for things to kind of wash out and get in place.
Give it a year or two and then see.
And just come back and it'd be interesting, maybe Monique could ask Ms. Comer, I think she made a good point that once people have a bad experience or they have a rate increase, they tend to remember that. It'd be interesting to ask her how long that needs to be before you kind of overcome that, because you wouldn't necessarily pick up the same people. So just how long a time frame, you might include that, Herbie, in your plan. Just if she says, within 6 months or a year, then some of those feelings wash out and it'd be good to go back and pick it up. That might be something to consider.
I think, Monique, when we did the customer survey, I know that you said normally you would do that every 5 years or so. Was there some standard for doing surveys?
That was the old standard. Most utilities do them now every 2 to 3 years. And she actually, when I walked out and spoke with her, she said we might want to revisit it in 18 months. Start looking at it again to review it in about 18 months. And she did say that that was about the amount of time it takes for people to start to forget those bad memories that they have, and go from 18 months to 2 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is that it, folks? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second? I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Good meeting. Good meeting.